Chapter 1179. Lin Shi condensed the world order into an army. After losing a large amount of order, the soul world began to become chaotic. Therefore, another army that was the complete opposite of the absolute order army appeared. It was a completely chaotic, twisted army without any order. Lin Shi was the world. The order in the world belonged to him, and the chaos also belonged to him. He once again split his soul and gave the two armies their thoughts. Destroying everything in unation became the instinct that was branded at the bottom of the logic of the two armies. And the absolute order and chaos were destined to be incompatible. Therefore, in the soul world, three camps that couldn't be merged at all appeared. Order and chaos descended on the planet where unation was located. Endless brutality and slaughter broke out in an extremely abrupt manner along with the huge disaster. There was no longer any concealment. In the eyes of unation, the world undisguisedly revealed its most ferocious true face and malice, wanting to kill them all. The newly established unation was completely destroyed without the slightest resistance. The main city completely collapsed. The bloody battle looked more like a naked massacre. Each individual of the Order and Chaos army that controlled the rules of the world was like a god to ordinary people and couldn't be resisted. When they descended in batches, all the resistance of unation became meaningless. The two completely opposite armies completely destroyed all resistance, and all technical data was completely destroyed. At this moment, their civilization didn't even have the chance to regress. This was a complete extinction that was destined from the beginning. Completely and utterly. Unation disappeared. Everyone in unation died in the malice of the world. The once glorious civilization completely disappeared. Order and chaos constantly wandered on the surface of the planet, eliminating all existential threats. All kinds of living things were going extinct. Then it was plants. The planet became barren again. The environment was getting worse and worse. In the extreme destruction, the entire planet was changing back to the period when it was just formed. But Lin Shi was already on the verge of collapse. In his world, he wouldn't die. But the Order and Chaos army's annihilation of unation and all living things. It was equivalent to one part of his soul harming another part of his soul. An uncontrollable weakness followed. Everything that was destroyed turned into the smallest soul fragments and began to merge with him. But this needed time. Lin Shi's mind began to become extremely dazed. As the broken soul merged bit by bit, his thoughts seemed to be constantly drifting away. Farther and farther away. An almost eternal trance and silence intertwined. The silent world was also quietly changing. Lin Shi used the laws of the world to create order, forming a corresponding chaos. The turbulent laws of the world became more and more obvious as it accelerated. The almost completely barren planet had come to an end. The end was also asks. The environment began to stabilize again. Creatures and plants began to appear. Civilization had once again sprouted. The Moon Nation had already become a part of the past that could no longer be explored. The new civilization gained the ability to directly come into contact with the laws of the world in the turbulent world. They respected the absolute law, approached order, approached Lin Shi's soul, but at the same time, they instinctively rejected the other part of Lin Shi's soul that represented chaos. This was a civilization of giants. They revered light and could also transform into light. They were good at making use of all kinds of extremely hot light. When Lin Shi woke up from his long trance, the giant's country of light had almost reached the level of the spirit kingdom. And so, Lin Shi used the chaos to summon Evernight. In the eternal night, the light was extinguished. The country of light was completely wiped out. The cycle of reincarnation began again. Civilization began to sprout from the flames and lava. Creatures that were born to be close to chaos were born. They used the rules of chaos to develop to the peak in the shortest time in an unpredictable way, which woke Lin Shi up again. And so, extinction came again. Then the dragons. Then the elves. Then the dwarves. Then the monsters. Life and civilization grew and multiplied. Extinction always came as scheduled. There would be no accidents, and there would be no flukes. Lin Shi's silent trance became longer and longer, and the cycle of reincarnation became faster and faster. His soul was becoming weaker and thinner. Order and chaos still existed. They were constantly entangled with the new civilization. The initially easy slaughter began to become anxious and even a little tragic in the cycle of reincarnation. The laws of the world were in turmoil. In such an environment, every time a new civilization appeared, it would grasp more and more of the world's laws. To a certain extent, it was equivalent to robbing Lin Shi's soul. The ending seemed to have been decided. There would be no real winner in this war. When Lin Shi's soul continued to dissipate and eventually died, this spiritual world was destined to be completely destroyed. The soul fragment that lost its core would also completely turn into nothingness. The unknown had never appeared. If this situation continued, it was equivalent to Lin Shi playing himself to death. The soul returning to one seemed more and more out of reach. Humans, giants, dragons, elves, dwarves, monsters, reincarnation after reincarnation, cycle after cycle. But nothing was willing to return to the whole. Order and chaos were incomparably powerful, but they were only his creations. And the new civilization, which carried countless of his soul fragments, clearly had its own thoughts. They were biased towards order and close to chaos, but no matter what civilization it was, they were all yearning for true freedom. The resistance became stronger and even more tenacious in the absolute oppression. They couldn't see hope. But they never gave up. Until everything was destroyed, until the world turned into nothingness. Time was getting faster and faster. The world was getting bigger and bigger. The planet that was constantly reincarnating and giving birth to new civilizations was constantly growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. It became 10 times bigger, 100 times bigger, expanding crazily in the space of the entire galaxy. That was because Lin Shi's soul was constantly disintegrating. But as the world expanded, he became smaller and his figure became fainter and fainter. He became lighter, thinner, pale, and gradually transparent. It became fainter, thinner, paler, and gradually transparent. This time, it was a very standard human. This time, it was a very standard human. The human continued to develop. Order and shadow began to disappear as Lin Shi's soul disintegrated. Lin Shi's body became a thin, almost non-existent shadow. This shadow was extremely illusory, but it was incomparably real between heaven and earth. Because this was the state of his real existence. A state that was about to dissipate, but there was still a trace of it remaining. It was illusory, but incomparably real. The planets suddenly lit up with a dazzling golden light. The golden light formed a huge shock wave that pierced through heaven and earth. With Lin Shi's shadow as the center, it instantly enveloped the entire planet. The constantly expanding planet began to shrink at a crazy speed. The acceleration of time stopped. The planet instantly became the size of a normal planet. Then it shrank again, becoming the size of a continent. The shrinking continued. The races that had reincarnated one after another appeared one after another, merging into Lin Shi's soul. The planet shrunk to the size of a province. All kinds of technological buildings began to fade and change color, becoming ancient and gloomy. The golden light in Lin Shi's shadow shone brighter, like an eternal brand. This was something that Lin Shi had always known, but never thought that he had ever possessed it. This kind of thing was equally famous among the 3 major factions under the stars. This was the foundation that ensured that every peak character could stand at the peak, and it was also the biggest barrier that could guarantee their return after the end. The dazzling sword light completely illuminated the world. It was glorious, real and clear. This light was the real brand hidden in the deepest part of Lin Shi's soul. The real brand bound Lin Shi's soul. The shrinking planet finally became an extremely ancient and gloomy city. The sky above the city was dark and rainy, silent and gloomy. Lin Shi's soul shadow stood on the city tower, silently looking at the void outside the city. The city walls were erected high. In the middle of the towering city gates, two ancient characters and Lin Shi's real brand vibrated at the same time. The light shone brightly. Lin Shi couldn't see the two characters that represented the name of the city. But the unknown that was ready to devour Lin Shi's soul saw it clearly. Amidst the dazzling radiance, the two runes became clearer and more real. Zhao Gu. Time paused for a moment. In the dead silence, the unknown's disbelieving roar pierced through the whole world. It was not until this moment that he truly confirmed Lin Shi's identity. Di Zhou. Chapter 1180. Astonishment, doubt, fear, and anger. The wild roars filled the entire world, bringing with them an incomparably complex and majestic feeling. The voice was so loud and high-pitched that when it came over, it had completely lost its meaning and became a wild thunder that filled everything. The thunder roared. The huge sound waves swept through the world. The world began to shake. The ancient and awe-inspiring Zhaoga city was as stable as a rock. It replaced the planet and floated in the void. The hazy rain was falling over the city. The light of the star shone on the void on the edge of Zhaoga city, giving off countless golden lights. The world was still in turmoil. Countless minuscule substances began to gather in the void, gathering in all directions and corners, finally forming a somewhat blurry figure. The vague figure gradually became clear, revealing the appearance of Jiang Shangyu. Lin Shi's eyes emitted a subtle light. He had completely recovered his consciousness. He stood on the city wall and looked at Jiang Shangyu outside the city, calm and collected. The world stabilized. Jiang Shangyu appeared in front of him, which meant that he had withdrawn from Lin Shi's fate. This soul world had a real enemy, and because of the existence of this enemy, it began to calm down. Jiang Shangyu's aura was completely chaotic. In the shortest time, all his aura seemed to have completely changed, and his human consciousness was completely hidden. A kind of crazy, brutal, chaotic, and vague will directly hit the city wall of Zhaoga city with monstrous killing intent. He already knew that Lin Shi was a human emperor who was returning. It was already incredible that he had not returned in the real environment, but the other party's true identity made him even more incredible. Di Zhou. This identity represented too many things. In the neutral camp, the word, helping the evildoer, was a taboo. The Zhou who helped the evildoer was the Zhou of Di Zhou. This word represented a natural position. A word seemed to be nothing, but the position represented by this word was naturally biased towards the order camp. The reason why this word could become a taboo had nothing to do with personal preferences. To some extent, this word represented an absolute conflict between camps. Di Zhou. This was the last human emperor in the long history of the ancient human clan. Huang Shi was the beginning of the ancient human clan. Di Zhou was the end of the ancient human clan. Everything happened in Miracle City back then. That was the most brilliant plan by the Order faction to sow discord. Di Zhou fell in love with Huang Shi's daughter, Feng Qinggu. In the rumors spread by the Order camp, he became a fatuous ruler who wanted to desecrate Qin Weibai and became estranged from Huang Shi. In order to prove his innocence, Di Zhou used the Xianyuan sword to severely injure Qin Weibai, who was born to be at the peak of the Order camp. It was hard to imagine how much pain she had suffered at that time. As the daughter of Huang Shi and Qin Weibai, Feng Qinggu split her soul and formed a real doppelganger. She charmed Emperor Zhou and caused the division of the Zhou dynasty. That clone fully demonstrated what it meant to truly cause the downfall of a country and bring disaster to the people. The Zhou dynasty completely collapsed. During that chaotic and intense period of time, the largest conflict broke out between the three factions. Amidst the rules of chaos and order, the Order faction created a nearly supreme artifact, the investiture of the gods. Amidst the chaotic situation of the humankind, a large number of nobles and ministers had been confused and exhausted by the chaos. The Order faction used the investiture of the gods as a contract and used the name of investiture of the gods to successfully lure most of the human elites to defect and join the Order faction. Once again, the Order faction used the investiture of the gods to completely distort the human race's luck of the defectors into another kind of substance that could not be seen or touched. In the end, Di Zhou died at the hands of Huang Shi. Under the divine form 9 deaths, his soul scattered. That was Huang Shi's greatest mistake since she took control of the human race. After the fall of Emperor Zhou, the Order faction released that distorted substance in the environment of Miracle City. The Order faction called it destiny. The destiny of heaven and the fortune of the human race were constantly entangled. In the real environment of Miracle City, there had never been a new human emperor since Di Zhou. Every person who ascended to the supreme position became an emperor and called himself the Son of Heaven. The era of the human emperor standing shoulder to shoulder with heaven and earth had come to an end. The Order faction borrowed the real environment of Miracle City to create a real order. If they succeeded, the human race would lose the last soil for survival. Emperor Shi invited the universe humans to enter Miracle City. When luck and heaven's will were intertwined, the universe's humans used their faith to temporarily separate heaven's will. Huang Shi and the original Qin Weibai fought to the death with the Order faction in the starry sky. Doomsday, demon, creator, the peak energy of the Order faction was endless. This decisive battle was doomed to fail. There was no chance of success. Qin Weibai died in the decisive battle. Huang Shi used a real remnant soul to enter Qin Weibai's real imprint, ensuring the possibility of her return. Thus, under the starry sky, the first human emperor who lost a remnant soul entered the final madness. The fortune of the human race was almost exhausted in this battle. And the destiny of the Order faction left in Miracle City also fell apart. The human race barely managed to defend Miracle City, but in terms of the overall situation, it was a crushing defeat. Huang Shi died in the decisive battle and entered the end of the world as a remnant soul. The world began its first reincarnation. Great Emperor Shenyuan, who took over the authority, moved Miracle City. In order to wear down the collapsing destiny of heaven, he used sword energy to seal the spacetime around Miracle City. After the reincarnation, the fortune of the human race slowly condensed again. The number of shattered destiny of heaven decreased, but it still affected the history of Miracle City. As time went by, the dynasty changed. Any emperor who carried the so-called destiny of heaven did not last long. Until the establishment of Zhongzhou state, the destiny of heaven had basically disappeared, and the fortune of the human race regained the upper hand. So today's human emperor and god of war appeared. They left Miracle City hundreds of years ago in the real time. Their departure also completely shattered the lingering destiny of heaven. That was why Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai officially returned. Di Zhou. Di Zhou, Jiang Shangyu kept muttering to himself. Under the chaotic rules, all his voices turned into broken syllables, but his eyes gradually became fanatical. Di Zhou was personally ended by Huang Shi. Under the 9 deaths of divine form, even the human emperor would not be able to return in theory. Could it be that Huang Shi ended Di Zhou but did not completely erase his real imprint? Was it intentional mercy? Or was there some reason that Huang Shi's state at that time was not enough to completely erase Di Zhou's real imprint? Looking at the current situation, Di Zhou could only be regarded as resurrection, not return at all. If this was also a kind of return, without returning in the real environment, such a return was doomed to fail from the beginning. This also meant that although his real imprint still existed, there were already some unstable places. Jiang Shangyu's eyes suddenly lit up and became extremely greedy. Chapter 1181. There weren't any words that could accurately describe the desire of the Order and Shadow factions for the truth. Their thirst for the truth even surpassed their instinct to destroy the neutral camp. Back then, the Order faction wanted to create a true order in Miracle City. Now Jiang Shangyu was lurking in the Miracle City and plotting the real environment. Both sides had the same goal. That was to make oneself real. Reality. This was the human race's and even the neutral camp's greatest trump card. It was also the trump card that guaranteed their survival. Jiang Shangyu wasn't sure what would happen after he got the truth, but he had countless speculations. If he truly became the apocalypse, then all of his current authorities would no longer be randomly transferred. His strength would also be maintained at its peak. There would be no period of weakness. Possessing reality was equivalent to possessing life. He would no longer have to worry about the top experts from the neutral faction entering World's End in desperation. He could become a true unknown, standing high above the World's End and rebirth, or he could find a true environment to return to, increase his authority, and further devour the soil of the neutral faction. As long as he had the truth, given time, he could become the fully deserving #1 expert under the starry sky. He might even have the chance to become the master of the world. He was lying dormant in the City of Miracles. He was competing with Li Tianlan. He was establishing his own power. Jiang Shangyu wanted to protect his family. As for the unknown, it was an attempt to create its own true imprint. The goals of the two sides could be agreed to a certain extent. As a result, the fusion between the two went extremely smoothly. Even though countless people were paying attention to them, no one could accurately determine their state. The difficulty of creating a true imprint in Miracle City was beyond the unknown imagination. That kind of difficulty was not something that could be overcome in a short period of time. But even so, he still saw a chance of success. This possibility was very, very small, so small that it was almost negligible. But even if the possibility was small, it was real. There was no reason to let go of the unknown. After all, the cost of trying was not high. It was only a few decades or 100 years of real time. Time was meaningless under the starry sky. As for the unknown, be it real time or any other time, was meaningless to him. Most of the time, dozens of years or even hundreds of years were just the time it took for him to ponder over a single problem. Of course, he would not miss such an opportunity. Even if he failed, as long as it was still possible, he would just have to start all over again. But now, he met Lin Shi. To be exact, he was a human emperor who was in a strange state. Lin Shi was not returning. He couldn't even be compared to Di Zhou now. His true imprint clearly had a layer of alienation from his soul. This was completely different from Li Tianlan. He didn't know the possibility of seeing Lin Shi directly devouring Di Zhou's real imprint. One could imagine how excited he was. The true imprint of the ancient human emperors. If he could really devour it, it would definitely be much more than what he had planned for many years in Miracle City. He could even use Di Zhou's true imprint to return to the spacetime that belonged to the Zhou dynasty, allowing the true imprint to return to its peak state. As the greatest god of slaughter under the stars, Di Zhou was about to perish, an unknown had grasped the authority of the god of slaughter. Even though he was still in a weakened state, he could still contend against Huang Shi at the time. This was the only chance since the beginning of time. The true imprint was close at hand. Jiang Shangyu did not hesitate at all. His figure stood under the void and opened his hands. The entire void seemed to have been folded several times in an instant. To be exact, what he folded was not the empty space, but the distance between him and Zhaoga City. The distance between them was instantly shortened. Infinite elements surged and broke out. Thunderbolts, raging fire, storm, and ice. The messy light and shadow roared wildly. Outside Zhaoga City, there was absolute chaos everywhere. The void had completely disappeared. The light of the star was also completely blocked. As far as the eye could see, there were constantly surging elements everywhere. The boiling element power was increasing in the void of tens of millions of miles, as if forming a more and more powerful element world. This scene was so familiar. Even in the starry sky, in the war between neutrality and order, Lin Shi had seen this scene countless times. The elemental forbidden spell, world-ending tribulation. If this forbidden spell appeared in Miracle City and the surging element power completely broke out, it was enough to destroy all the surface civilizations in the entire Miracle City in an instant. Jiang Shangyu waved his hand expressionlessly. The elemental forbidden spell, which had formed a substance, was mighty, and in an instant, it completely covered the entire Zhaoga City. Inside and outside Zhaoga City, there was a dazzling golden light. Lin Shi raised his arm expressionlessly. At this moment, his state was extremely mysterious. He was in a trance and extremely sober. A large number of blurry memories appeared in his mind, vague and indistinct. However, he could clearly feel the power coming from the city beneath his feet. The pitch-black giant sword took shape in his hand. In the face of the elemental forbidden spell surging toward him, Jiang Shangyu held the sword hilt tightly and suddenly waved the sword. There was no sword energy, no sword intent, and no sword light. An indescribable energy interfered with the whole world and all the elements in an instant. The energy seemed to exist and not exist. It ignored all the space, distance, and defense. As soon as Lin Shi's sword fell, it directly cut a deep wound on Jiang Shangyu's body. Blood kept spilling. Jiang Shangyu's aura kept fluctuating. Lin Shi's sword fell again. The invisible energy kept flowing with his sword. The elements that engulfed the whole Zhaoga city began to collapse at a speed visible to the naked eye under the invisible energy that Lin Shi was waving. The area covered by the elemental forbidden spell was filled with dazzling blankness one after another. Lin Shi's eyes were cold. He looked at Lin Shi, who was waving the sword crazily, and remained silent. Another slash landed on his body. The wounds were everywhere on his body. The invisible energy turned into a sharp edge that seemed to be able to tear everything. It constantly hurt him, from his body to his soul. The edge obliterated everything. Of course, Lin Shi knew what this kind of invisible, intangible, and even undetectable energy was. This was Emperor Zhou's unique skill in those days. It was also with this kind of thing that he was able to severely injure Qin Weibai, who stood at the peak of order at that time. This was the endless fate of the human clan. But endless was an empty word after all. Now Lin Shi was in a special state. What he could use was only a part of the fate in Zhaoga City. Jiang Shangyu stared at Lin Shi and sneered without saying a word. He was waiting. When the fate of the human clan in Zhaoga City was squandered, it would be time for him to completely devour Lin Shi's real stamp. He would devour the whole Zhaoga City. Chapter 1182. The void space had been completely replaced by the violent elements. There was chaotic light everywhere. The invisible fortune of the human race transformed into a surging sharpness. The light and shadow of the elements dissipated in front of the fortune of the human race, but they were immediately replenished. It was almost impossible to completely disperse a true elemental forbidden spell. Although the unknown's current state was extremely poor, he could already suppress Lin Shi in terms of his own level. Facing such a strange and empty true imprint, the unknown was determined to get it. He floated quietly outside the city. The power he had accumulated over the years was constantly being consumed, and he kept suppressing the ancient city under the dark rain. He didn't care about his own power and state anymore. As long as he could get the ancient city, he would fall into a deep sleep again. Thousands of years, the world would grow old, and the world would change. Nothing mattered. When he opened his eyes again, he would become the absolute strongest under the starry sky. A clear sharpness appeared in the fortune of the human race. The sharpness was extremely sharp, with a power that could tear everything apart, and it was wreaking havoc in the elemental world. The sneer on the unknown's face began to widen, and he looked extremely happy. The sharpness itself was a kind of form. The pure fortune of the human race couldn't be avoided, couldn't be predicted, and was truly invisible. The body of the unknown floating in the air moved forward for some distance. The shining elemental world outside Zhaoga City kept shaking and pressing forward. The city wall of Zhaoga City began to tremble. The rain in the sky also stopped. One after another, the sharpness kept exploding on the city wall tower. The sharpness still carried the power of the human race's fortune, but it had gradually turned into sharp sword energy. The elemental world, which had a large area of emptiness, became sticky and dense again. I like watching you struggle. The unknown voice was low and slow, with an indescribable cruel smile. Just like the entire human race, for thousands of years, your only outcome is to be destroyed. Either you choose to be destroyed, or you choose to be destroyed by us. That's the only difference. Does it make sense? The outcome can't be changed. His hands slowly moved forward. The sharpness that Lin Shi wielded had completely turned into endless sword energy. The fortune of the human race contained in the sword energy had almost completely disappeared. Leave everything to me. The unknown low voice was almost murmuring to itself, become my puppet, true imprint, everything you have will be mine. The voice that seemed to carry a trace of magic kept echoing, spacious and grand. Majestic and irresistible. The laws of the entire world seemed to be quietly changing. The unknown voice was clearly imprinted in the core rules of the world, becoming the most basic logic. What is the most basic logic? Take the human race in the real world for example. People would die if they didn't eat, drink or sleep. This was the most basic logic. Unchangeable and irresistible. And now, the unknown wanted Lin Shi to give everything he had to him. This became the basic logic of the world. Irresistible. Lin Shi stopped swinging his sword. The corners of the unknown lips curled up slightly. At this moment, he was not Jiang Shangyu. His every move was incomprehensible chaos and weirdness. The world needs your dedication. He reached out his palm and touched the golden light screen of Zhaoga City. The boundless elemental world around him disappeared in an instant. Completely and utterly disappeared. There were no more elemental storms. The chaotic rules were unscrupulous and mighty. The unknown changed his authority. The authority of the creator disappeared. This was the first authority that was exposed to Lin Shi. The authority of the initiator. This was the first thing Lin Shi knew about him. The second thing he knew was martial arts. Jiang Shangyu had briefly imitated Lin Shi's sword energy. So the other party had at least the authority of the 7th level of martial arts. And at this moment, the unknown exposed the third authority that he had mastered. The third thing he knew. It seemed to be the last one. The unknown smiled fiercely. The bottom rules and logic of the whole world were changing in an extremely twisted way. To be exact, it was not all the rules of the world that were changing. It was all the rules and logic with Lin Shi as the core. This was the peak authority of the calligrapher. When the authority of the calligrapher reached the peak, it was called fate. The unknown became fate. He really touched the real imprint of Lin Shi. In the earth-shaking changes of the rules and logic, the unknown was about to control everything about Lin Shi. Everything from the soul to the body. This was the control at the level of fate. Lin Shi's eyes kept the last trace of clarity. He looked at the unknown who had really walked on the city wall through the golden light. An extremely strong smile emerged from the depths of his eyes. He had been waiting for this moment for a long, long time. The third thing was indeed unknown before. Lin Shi didn't know that the unknown had mastered the authority of fate. The authority of the neutral camp was no more and no less. If the authority of martial arts was the most mature authority in the neutral camp, then the authority of the calligrapher could almost be said to be the most powerful authority in the neutral camp. One of the core authorities of the great Emperor Xianyuan in the corridor of time and space was fate. The birth of the authority of fate originated from the research of Qin Weibai's remnant soul by Her Majesty Huang Shi, so it was directly aimed at the devil of the order camp. To some extent, this was the authority to control everything. The unknown became fate. This was indeed an accident. But it was not an accident. Because Lin Shi was very sure that the other party would not let him go. Although it was a little unexpected that the other party would not let him go, Lin Shi had already made full preparations after determining the other party's goal. The golden light outside Zhaoga City and the smile in Lin Shi's eyes appeared at the same time. The golden light broke out completely in an instant. The shining colors directly formed a clear light screen around Zhaoga City. In the light screen, it was the unknown on the city gate tower. Outside the light screen, it was Jiang Shangyu standing in the void. Jiang Shangyu was separated from the unknown. He was completely isolated by the real stamp. Lin Shi really laughed. A smile appeared in his eyes and on his face. His smile was extremely bright and determined. He dared to chase Jiang Shanyu to his second base. He dared to fall into the world woven for him by the unknown. He dared to take risks. None of this was reckless. It was not even because he didn't know his identity as the human emperor of Dezhou. The only thing that allowed him to stand here without anyone worrying about him was his current identity. It was not the glory of the past. It was his current true identity. The 11th prince of the god of war realm. To be more precise, the biggest reason that supported him to come here was that he was the son of the god of war, Lin Shenyuan. With an incomparably strong smile, Lin Shi raised the long sword in his hand slightly. The unknown had already controlled his body. His movement was very simple. The long sword swung, and it was just a starting gesture. But everything was enough. The real stamp turned into a constantly trembling golden light. The blade of the long sword was raised slightly. It was not the famous broken reincarnation of the god of war in the starry sky. It was the 15th blade. The 15th blade reincarnation. Chapter 1183. He felt like he had fallen into a trap. It was hard to explain, but the moment Lin Shi smiled, a faint sense of unease appeared in his unknown consciousness. Uneasy. As fate, this should have been an emotion that should not have appeared, but now, as Lin Shi smiled, it became more and more obvious. Every corner of Zhaoga City was emitting an endless glow. This was the foundation of a true imprint. It was the fortune of the human race that Lin Shi could not mobilize. Boundless golden light was gathering, and a large area of Zhaoga City was collapsing. The drizzle that had stopped falling suddenly fell, and the rainstorm poured down, lightning flashed, and thunder roared. The light grew more and more intense, enveloping the periphery of the city layer by layer. The unknown consciousness was in the city. Jiang Shanyu's body was outside the city. It was at this moment that the unknown person realized that he had made a mistake that he shouldn't have made in order to devour the true imprint of Zhaoga City. He left his body. This was not carelessness. It could only be said that he had made some mistakes due to his impatience. It was not that Jiang Shanyu's body could not enter the real imprint, but in terms of the unknown state, it would be a little troublesome to bring Jiang Shanyu's body in. If there was trouble, it meant that he would have to pay a greater price. The unknown didn't think it was necessary. Facing a rank 8 martial path Azura. Even if Lin Shi used to be a Renhuang, he was not one now. Wasn't that completely different from Li Tianlan? Li Tianlan used to be the human emperor, and in a sense, he was also the human emperor now. Although Lin Shi used to be Dezhou, he was no longer Dezhou in any sense. With the other party's current state, he did not think that it would be a problem for him to devour this true imprint. Thus, his consciousness and body were now completely isolated by the true brand. This isolation was not unbreakable. But it takes time. The unknown person suddenly turned around. Through the layers of golden light, he saw his body. Jiang Shanyu seemed to have regained his consciousness after entering Zhaoga City. And so, he exchanged glances with the unknown. Inside and outside the city, layers of golden light and boundless destiny shone. The corners of Jiang Shanyu's mouth rose slightly. A strong smile spread in his eyes. The corners of his mouth rose, and his muscles relaxed, revealing a smile that was very similar to Lin Shi's. Lin Shi calculated the unknown. And Jiang Shanyu seemed to be waiting for this moment. Some things were unknown, but Jiang Shanyu didn't know. There were some things that Jiang Shanyu knew, but he didn't know. For example, the battle with Li Tianlan not long ago. Strictly speaking, it was a siege. He, Li Guangtu, Gu Xingyun, and the forces of Base 1 joined forces to besiege Li Tianlan. A crushing defeat. The shattering reincarnation had folded space, and its destructive power was almost infinitely close to the upper limit of combat power in a real environment. At that time, the unknown and Jiang Shanyu were one, but Jiang Shangyu's consciousness was the dominant one. The unknown, who was in a daze, did not see that sword. Even if he saw it, he would associate it with Huang Shi. But Jiang Shangyu was different. When he saw that sword, he thought of the 24 moves of sword. Then he thought of Lin Xianyuan, the god of war who created the 24 moves of sword. Unknown did not know of the existence of the war god realm. He had existed for a very long time. During his peak, the war god realm had not yet been established, and Lin Xianyuan had not yet entered the starry sky. Naturally, Jiang Shangyu did not know about the existence of the war god's realm. But Lin Shi's appearance gave him a reasonable speculation. Lin Shi was not a native of Miracle City. Both he and the unknown could see this. This was an immortal Azura who had fully activated his authority and understood the malice of the world. And this Azura used the 24 moves of sword in the battle with him. What did this mean? At least it meant that the 24 moves of sword had now appeared in the neutral camp. As the creator of the 24 moves of sword, Lin Xianyuan was also very likely to have entered the starry sky. The unknown just regarded the 24 moves of sword as a brand new kendo. After seeing Lin Xuanyuan's shattering reincarnation, combined with the unknown's memory, Jiang Shangyu was very sure what this sword would be like when it was developed to the extreme. Lin Shi could not exert it to the extreme, but it did not mean that the creator of this sword could not. Few people could really realize what the 24 moves of sword meant in kendo. It was different from the sword of 6 paths of reincarnation of the Wang family of Beihai. The sword of 6 paths of reincarnation focused on the outbreak and extreme explosive power. In a sense, the 6 paths of reincarnation could be said to be martial arts, Tao, and also a sword. But the 24 moves of sword was different. They were good at swords and extremely good at swords. The 24 moves of sword was just a sword, a pure sword. In the field of kendo, the 24 moves of sword was the real Bible of kendo and also the supreme peak. The sharp sword intent and sharpness had already penetrated into all aspects, including the human body, killing intent, time and space, and even the soul. It was difficult for Lin Shi to exert the extreme sword intent of the shattering reincarnation. He couldn't, but it did not mean that the 24 moves of sword couldn't. There was a very special sword in the 24 moves of sword. It was different from the last few moves of the absolute sword. But it was absolutely special. The 15th blade, reincarnation. In the cognition of martial arts in Miracle City, this sword was related to the spirit. It was the sublimation of the will and sword energy. It allowed one to reincarnate others' sword energy in an instant in the state of full outbreak, greatly improving the combat effectiveness. It seemed to be an extreme imitation of the sword, but in fact, it already had the shadow of the copy in the Tianjue authority. And when this sword left Miracle City, this reincarnation had not only an effect on the spirit, but also on the whole. The effect of the position was on time and space and the soul. In other words, if there was really an existence in the starry sky that could exert the sword intent of the 24 moves of sword to the extreme, then the moment Lin Shi raised the sword edge and used the 15th blade, reincarnation, that existence was completely likely to sense it because of time and space and the soul. This also meant that everything that Lin Shi faced now would be under the gaze of that existence. If there was such an existence, what would happen next? Right now, Lin Shi was facing an unknown. What would happen? Was there a need to think about it? Jiang Shangyu nodded to the unknown with a smile and gently waved his hand. From Li Tianlan, he realized what the shattering reincarnation would be like when it was developed to the extreme. So the moment the 15th blade made his move, he could almost be sure of the unknown's fate. His leisurely waving posture fell into the unknown's perception, extremely relaxed. The unknown's eyes were full of indifference. The surrounding golden light curtain was getting tougher and tougher. He couldn't break the blockade of the real brand in a short time. But he was fate now. As fate, he could speed up to swallow Lin Shi's soul, and then swallow the entire Zhaoge city. This was one more step than directly swallowing the real brand in the plan. But at the moment, it was obviously necessary to swallow Lin Shi, the source of his uneasiness. The unknown suddenly turned his head and no longer looked at Jiang Shangyu outside the city. Countless tentacles covered with complex patterns stretched out from behind him. The bottom rules of the world began to be constantly rewritten with the tentacles as the core. Everything related to Lin Shi was being modified, from the inside to the outside, deep into the soul. The tentacles wrapped around Lin Shi. The unknown's indifferent expression suddenly froze for a moment. A ray of black light suddenly burst out from Lin Shi's pupils. Double pupils. The double pupils in Lin Shi's eyes kept moving. Instead of saying that he was entangled by tentacles, at this moment, it was better to say that he took the initiative to stick to countless tentacles. The intelligence center formed by the chaotic rules analyzed Lin Shi's situation immediately. Now that both of them were in the real brand, Lin Shi had become completely able to analyze. The enemy's fate is invaded, and the enemy's fate is rewritten. Warning. 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 The enemy's characteristic is activated. Characteristic, Soul Attack. Soul Attack, messing up your own fate in a short time can make the fate node return to nothingness. During the duration of the characteristic, ignoring the fate invasion, ignoring the fate control, and not being controlled by any. During the duration of the characteristic, launching a counterattack effect on the invader. Counterattack, the subcharacteristic of Soul Attack, rewriting the control and invasion logic of any situation. According to the different invasion methods, reverse plunder the fate/soul of the invader. The tentacles wrapped around Lin Shi. At the same time, a large number of hands also entangled the unknown. The unknown's body just stiffened for a moment. The next second, under the chaotic rules, all his fate nodes and souls became chaotic. Soul Attack and reverse plunder completely failed. But during the duration of the characteristic, Lin Shi had completely regained his freedom. The sword edge trembled slightly in his hand. The 15th blade starting gesture that had been completed suddenly shook. Boom! Heaven and earth. Light and darkness. The ancient city and the void. Night and stars. Nothingness and reality. Everything shook for a moment at the same time. An indescribable aura directly enveloped Lin Shi's body. In a trance, the unknown's sight seemed to penetrate the endless distance. The flames of war burned wantonly in the starry sky. In the unknown's sight, a black ocean that spanned tens of thousands of light years across the battlefield appeared. The black ocean surged in the starry sky, and the peak sword intent smashed the stars. He was condensing the black ocean. The black ocean was also staring at him. The moment the feeling of being locked on rose, a huge and fatal crisis had already arrived. The vast starry sky seemed to be surging. It was night in Miracle City. The bright moon hung high in the sky. The sky was full of stars. Zhongzhou State, Star State, England, Germany, Snow Country, countless regions, in countless advanced astronomical observatories in the world. A large number of instruments observing the starry sky fluctuated violently at the same time. A large number of universe indexes soared wildly at the same time. In different regions, all the indexes began to fluctuate in an extremely chaotic way. The universe that humans currently observed seemed to have completely become chaotic at this moment. On the vast battlefield billions of light years away, the black ocean surged and roared, and the black waves that were tens of thousands of feet high suddenly flew at an unimaginable speed. The nearest star was instantly destroyed by the sword light. Tens of millions of mechanical legions were torn into pieces because they lost the supplement of star energy. The black sword light converged into a pitch-black sword light, moving all the way forward in the void. Faster than light speed? Warp speed jump? Time travel? Slow. Too slow. All the understanding of speed was not enough to describe the speed of this sword light. The so-called faster than light speed became the speed of a turtle in front of the sword light. What was the fastest speed in the starry sky in the world? Faster than light speed was just a physical concept. The fastest speed was the speed of thought. You stood on the other side of the starry sky that was trillions of light years away and thought of Miracle City. So you arrived at Miracle City at the moment you thought of Miracle City. That was the speed of thought. Regardless of any distance, regardless of time and space, it arrived in an instant. The black edge crisscrossed in the universe, crossed countless star fields in an instant, and rushed into the rotating galaxy. In the central area of the rotating galaxy, the heaven-deceiving king of time and space corridor narrowed his eyes. His eyes directly deceived all the distance in the rotating galaxy. The sword light that crossed more than half of the universe at the speed of thought rushed into the solar system through the deceived distance. The sword formation of the entire Milky Way was shaken by this sword light. In Miracle City, people all over the world were looking up at the sky. Billions of people were dumbfounded and looked incredulous. Under the night sky of Zhongzhou State, the bright moon changed its light dramatically in an instant. The pale white moonlight was dyed into a dark blue full of destructive aura in the blink of an eye. The blue moonlight was flowing, fierce and silent. In other countries, even in the daytime, the blue moon still appeared abruptly in the sky, shining side by side with the sun. The sword formation of the entire Milky Way had been fully activated. Endless sharpness followed the black sword light and rushed into the Miracle City. Tiannan, Xianyuan City. Li Tianlan, who had just returned to Xianyuan City with the captives, suddenly raised his eyebrows. Under the blue moonlight, he could clearly feel a familiar yet unbelievably vast sharpness sweeping across the entire night sky. The black windbreaker he was wearing turned into the sword formation of 13 stories in an instant. Famous swords appeared clearly around Li Tianlan one after another, and the sword light shone everywhere. The sword energy around Li Tianlan became chaotic uncontrollably. There were exclamations everywhere in Emperor Dong's palace. A large number of guards involuntarily pulled out the long swords in their hands and aimed at the void. Everything on the ground was dislocated in an instant. Stones, glass, fallen leaves, and even water splashes. Everything in the world, under the sharpness sweeping the night sky, all aimed at the sky with their sharp sides. Under the absolute suppression of the real environment, the black sharpness shuttled wildly in the sky with great difficulty but incomparably determination. Li Tianlan's eyes suddenly lit up. In his vision, a dark and absolutely condensed sword energy clearly appeared, crossing the sky of Tiannan like a meteor. The Eternal Sword. This scene was so familiar. It was almost a repeat of the sword move of Mormons in East Europe a few years ago. The sword light leaped over Xianyuan and flew all the way away. Li Tianlan pondered for a moment and suddenly pressed the 13 stories. The restless sword light suddenly quieted down. Then, with Li Tianlan as the center, a new sword energy directly chased after the sword light that flew out of Tiannan. In the real environment, Li Tianlan's sword energy was incredibly fast. The colorful sword light and the pitch-black sword chi instantly fused together. Billions of light years away, Lin Xianyuan, the god of war, who did not let Lin Shi reincarnate his sword intent but chose to do it himself, received the prompt immediately. The integration with the real sword energy is successful. The suppression of the real environment is reduced by 70%. The source of the real sword energy has been locked. The source of the sword energy, Li Tianlan, Huang Shi, successfully triggered the fate of the human tribe. Li Tianlan, Huang Shi, preliminarily understood the breaking of reincarnation sword intent. Understanding progress plus 10%. After the sword energy left Miracle City, it randomly borrowed one of Huang Shi's abilities, one time. Randomizing. Characteristics, unmatched. Martial arts, medium matching. Random failure. Exclusive, unmatched. Divine form. Randomization successful. The sword light left Miracle City and will temporarily borrow one of Huang Shi's divine forms, one time. Randomization successful. The sword light left Miracle City and will borrow Huang Shi's divine form, 9 deaths. 9 deaths, annihilate all activity and melt all essence. 9 deaths of divine form, source, the original truth. Ignoring the rules of chaos, the rules of order, the real brand, and the target level. Under the 9 deaths of divine form, everything turned into nothingness. It could not be resurrected. It could not be revived. Boom! The dark sword light instantly shone with an incomparably demonic brilliance, and its speed suddenly increased. Wherever the sword light passed, the surrounding void was constantly recombining, shattering, recombining, and shattering, growing and multiplying endlessly. Time and space seemed to be constantly cycling. Li Tianlan's Real sword energy was an auxiliary. The sword formation of the Milky Way was an auxiliary. The void that was constantly cycling and recombining was the 6 paths of reincarnation sword from the distant human emperor. The 6 paths of reincarnation sword was resisting the suppression of the real environment. This sword was also an auxiliary, maximizing the power of the breaking of reincarnation. Only the breaking of reincarnation sword was the real killing move. The sword light did not waste even a second in the distance of countless light years. The distance of the spinning Milky Way was deceived to 0. The sword light rushed into Miracle City, and it also did not waste a second. In the real environment, the sword light flew from the sky. 3 seconds later, it officially arrived in South America. 4 seconds later, the blue moon with the color of destruction in the sky completely disappeared. The dark sword light shone with demonic colors and directly rushed into the number 2 base of Jiangshangyu in South America, into the unknown and Lin Shi's soul world. Tear, destroy, and shatter. Out of the real environment, the dark sword light completely revealed its original appearance. That was the most extreme sword light since ancient times. It was the sharpest edge in the history of the human clan. It was the indelible arrogance of the neutral camp in several samsara. A stroke of the war god. Breaking reincarnation, cutting off fate, and tearing the rules. This was Lin Xuanyuan's sword. It was also Lin Xuanyuan's swordsmanship. He refused fate, reincarnation, return, and other privileges. If he wanted to refuse, he had to be broken first. Breaking reincarnation to the extreme was the real eternity. People would die, flowers would wither, and the starry sky would die. Nothing was eternal except eternity. Eternal breaking was also a kind of eternity. So the war god would always be the war god. When order and shadow were yearning for reality, the war god's sword was waving. The eyes of the war god had surpassed reality. Chapter 1184. The chaotic rules all over the world had completely disappeared. The chaos, which seemed to have no rules, was like a chain that was completely cut off in an instant. The world was suddenly broken. The sword light passed through the starry sky and penetrated the entire spiritual world without any stagnation. It was a kind of sharpness that couldn't be described by any word. The god of war, Lin Xianyuan. In the starry sky where time was meaningless, for the neutral camp and the whole world, every sword stroke of the god of war was the sharpness of the starry sky. A thin black line seemed to appear on the star in the spiritual world. The black line expanded rapidly in the blink of an eye. The star disappeared in an instant. All the light and heat were completely silent. The energy of the star was completely absorbed, and the core of the star was completely broken. The black sword light suddenly turned into an ocean that drowned the whole galaxy. The earth-shattering sword chi kept circling around. Nothing could continue to exist under this sword light. The void, the planet, the dust, all substances, any elements, any rules, and a lot of privileges. Broken. All of them were broken. The galaxy, which was countless times stronger than the real planet, was completely broken. The mighty sword light rushed into the light curtain made of the real imprints and went straight into Zhaoga City. The dark rain in Zhaoga City was everywhere. Every brick and tile and every corner were shining with sharpness. The sword light that was enough to cut everything surged forward. There was no concept of distance or time. The moment the sword energy appeared, the black ocean had completely drowned the unknown that was trying to swallow Lin Shi. Confusion, shock, and fear. Countless emotions flashed by. Then they turned into complete despair. This was a sword stroke that was completely beyond the knowledge of the unknown. The sword light was real. But the endless sword energy was outside the reality. It swept across the starry sky and formed a sharpness that could tear everything in the real sense. The unknown shape kept changing in the black ocean. The appearance of Jiang Shanyu completely disappeared. All kinds of strange shapes kept appearing. Some were spiritual bodies, some were physical bodies, and even some were gaseous. That was the soul of the unknown. Countless kinds of privileges kept bursting out as his soul changed. The turbulent ocean of sword energy surged wildly. The various privileges and the turbulent sea shook at the same time. The soul of the unknown, which was constantly changing, froze for a moment. The earth-shattering ocean was extremely swift and fierce. The fuzzy and chaotic soul froze for less than half a second, and then directly exploded. The 9 deaths of the divine form. Broken reincarnation. This sword light represented the highest level of sword energy and the most thorough destruction of the human race. Ignoring all rules. An unknown person had fallen. If this was in the outside world, this scene would have caused the stars of space to tremble and cause all sorts of abnormal phenomena. This indicated that the authority of chaos was missing in some way, as well as the lack of a peak power source of the chaos faction, but this was Miracle City. To be precise, this was the soul world that the Miracle City believed to be opened up. That was why this ancient unknown was completely terminated. In a certain sense, it was actually done without a sound. The unknown broken soul fragments all rushed out of Zhaoga City. The duration of Lin Shi's soul counter-assault was about to end. And a second before the characteristic disappeared, as the unknown soul fragment exploded, an incomparably dazzling light spot suddenly appeared in Lin Shi's hand. This was an unknown part of the soul. Under the effect of counterattack, with the death of unknown, Lin Shi's reverse plunder of peak energy was successful for the first time. The fragment kept spinning in his hand, and with a dazzling light, it finally formed a seed. The moment more soul fragments rushed out of Zhaoga City, they directly gathered toward Jiang Shanyu's body outside the city. The authority of chaos began to merge with his body. Jiang Shanyu, whose smile was getting wider and wider, bowed slightly to the ocean in the city and waved his hand gently, as if saying goodbye. He took a deep breath. The rules of chaos began to spread outside the city. Jiang Shanyu disrupted the rules of the universe in this world. So his deep breath directly formed a wormhole that kept spinning. It was not a wormhole in the physical sense, but a wormhole that acted on the soul and reality. The black ocean was still vast and mighty. Before killing the unknown, it was the sword light that controlled the divine form. After the doomsday fell, it was the divine form that controlled the sword light. The 9 deaths of the divine form obliterated everything. With the help of the sword energy of the god of war, the 9 deaths of the divine form completely cut off the possibility of this unknown resurrection. In order to completely destroy the unknown, the divine form also consumed a huge amount of energy and sword energy, so that it could not stop Jiang Shanyu from leaving. The star-like soul fragments formed a large number of light spots and rushed into Jiang Shanyu's body. Jiang Shanyu, with a smile on his face, rushed into the wormhole and disappeared in an instant. Jiang Shanyu left the battlefield with the rules of chaos. The black ocean of sword energy began to calm down again. The broken world began to collapse. Zhaoga City gradually became nothingness. Everything here was Lin Shi's soul. With the collapse of the world, his soul would become a whole again. He didn't need to show up when he returned. When his soul returned, he would appear in Miracle City. In the silent collapse of the world, Lin Shi silently lowered his head and looked at the soul seed in his hand. The brightness of the seed here was extremely bright. It was dazzling and full of majestic destructive power. The soul of the unknown exploded into stars all over the sky. Even in the sky full of stars, the seed in Lin Shi's hand could be said to be the brightest one. It was self-evident what it meant. Lin Shi's heart began to beat wildly. Everything that happened today was too coincidental. His characteristic, the counterattack of the soul, was unique. Even Her Majesty Huang Shi did not have this characteristic. And an unknown in a weak state was even more rare. It was almost impossible to let an unknown in a weak state leave his body and appear in the state of a soul. Even these conditions could be met. For the first time in the starry sky, the sword energy of the broken reincarnation faced the unknown in this state. Moreover, it was the broken reincarnation that merged with the divine form 9 deaths. In this series of events, the probability of each event happening was close to 0. But today, all these seemingly impossible things had come together. So, the unknown fell. The reverse plundering of the soul was successful. If any of these things were missing, it would be impossible to plunder the soul of the unknown. The unknown itself was the core of the chaotic rules. Even if the consciousness of the unknown was destroyed, the rules and authority in the soul would be completely transferred and could not be plundered. But now, Lin Shi had plundered the unknown soul. This also meant that a part of the unknown, or a certain kind of authority, appeared in the form of a seed in Lin Shi's hands. This was the purest soul and authority. It didn't belong to the dark shadow. In other words, as long as he merged with this seed, after a long time, Lin Shi would be able to have this part of the authority of the unknown. What kind of authority was it? Judging from the brightness alone, it could be said to be one of the strongest of all the authority of the soul. Was it the authority of the Creator? Or, was it the authority of fate? Lin Shi took a few rapid breaths and waited silently. His thinking center had already begun to analyze the soul fragment as soon as it received it. Now, the analysis progress had reached 99%. Under his extremely expectant gaze, the analysis progress went from 99% to 100%. Target analysis successful. Target source, shadow rule, soul fragment. Target, soul seed, contains some kind of authority. Successfully analyzed soul seed. Authority fragment detected, detecting authority alignment. Authority detection complete. Authority alignment, order. Successfully detected order alignment, doomsday authority fragment. Chapter 1185. Lin Shi's hands suddenly shook. The doomsday authorization fragment in his hands suddenly emitted countless tiny lights. A sea of knowledge rushed into Lin Shi's mind. Lin Shi subconsciously clenched the authorization fragment in his hand. The thought center in his mind vibrated continuously as a large number of reminders repeatedly attacked Lin Shi's mind. Authorization seed detected, performing faction analysis. Faction analysis successful, order, dividing order faction authorization seed detected, order faction authorization seed, doomsday authorization fragment, authorization seed source. Authorization seed composition, pure authorization seed. No consciousness of the world. Authorization seed completeness, 57%. You have the authorization seed, shallow knowledge infusion activated, but after infusion, you can fuse with the doomsday authorization seed to unlock a new authorization, shallow knowledge infusion complete, scholar authorization detected, proceed with fusion. Doctor authorization detected, proceed with fusion. Spitfire authorization detected, proceed with fusion. Lin Shi's body trembled slightly as he forced himself to calm down. He knew very well what this meant. This was a miraculous harvest. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that since the beginning of human history, this was the first peak-level authorization seed obtained by humanity. The apocalypse, the unknown, the creator, the devil, in the past few reincarnations, whether it was the order or the shadow faction, there were peak-level combatants who fell or were completely terminated. But the neutral faction had never obtained their authorization fragments. Occasionally, there would be one or two low-level authority shards, but they weren't pure at all. Instead, they were filled with the rules of the faction, or the malice of the world. These things couldn't be fused, nor could new authorization seeds be added, unless there was a 100% risk of being assimilated by other factions. Under the stars, the number of humans who could touch the world authorization seed wasn't low, but those who could touch high-level authorization seeds were few, and those who could have more than one authorization seed were even fewer. The world would end. If there was an end, there would be a beginning. This concept was the reincarnation under the stars. And when the reincarnation began, those who successfully returned and regained their self-awareness would have a second authorization seed. Return and recovery weren't exclusive to some peak-level characters. After reaching the peak, their greatest advantage was that they had a high chance of surviving the end of the world and continuing to exist. Even if they fell, because of the true imprint, they could return again. This was a true return. Those who didn't reach the peak were called reincarnation. In a certain sense, there was a great deal of randomness. Therefore, some lucky ones who had reincarnated would have the qualifications to control the second type of authority. This could be said to be the only hope of the human race, even though it was incomparably sad. The great Emperor Xianyuan of the spacetime corridor had already been revived 3 times. For this reason, not only did he have the authority of the neutral faction, but he also had 3 different authorities: the Reaper, Fate, and the Sovereign Lord. Because of this, he was the undisputed #1 expert in the neutral camp. Even the human emperor of the Great Emperor Palace and the God of War from the God of War realm were no match for him. Now, another end was just around the corner. The human emperor of the Renhuang Palace was bound to fall. After returning, he would have his second kind of authority. On the other hand, the war god refused to reincarnate and wanted to focus on killing gods to surpass reality. The 2 choices had nothing to do with right or wrong, it was just that their paths were different. Lin Shi had never thought about this before. He had great potential, so he had always been thinking about how to break through his current bottleneck and finally become a Reaper. This was destined to be a difficult problem to solve in a short period of time. Even Lin Shi himself didn't have a clue. But now, he had touched the Doomsday Fragment. An indescribable excitement made his mind go blank for a short period of time. The Doomsday Fragment wasn't complete, but the core authority was still there. And this seed was pure, without the malice of the world. Lin Shi had enough capital to absorb and fuse with this seed. Most importantly, such a fusion. No. Can. Have. Run. What? Can. Lose. This also meant that as long as he had time, he could completely give up the Reaper authority and become the first Doomsday in the history of the human race. The undisputed #1 authority under the starry sky. The omnipotent and omnipresent #1 authority. This was the best chance. It could even be said to be the only chance in the history of the human race. Once missed, it would be impossible to have it again. For a long and empty period of time, the human race had always been a neutral creature. The human race needed order, but it didn't need the absolute order that lost itself. The human race needed chaos, but it also didn't need the absolute chaos that lost itself. The human race swayed between the two, forming a balance, so Her Majesty Huang Shi created the neutral camp, creating the neutral authority. The universe ended and began again, began and ended again, reincarnation repeated, thousands of races continued to recover. But for countless years, all the races in the neutral camp could only set foot on the peak through the neutral authority. The authority that the human race could touch the order camp was very clear, and the end was also very clear. Any neutral camp. The highest upper limit of the authority to touch the order camp was the peak of level 8 authority. For example, the current Xianyuan Wushang. For example, the apostles around Lin Shi. They could set foot on the peak again in other neutral authorities, but at their level of authority in the order camp, they could no longer make any progress, unless they accepted the shadowy order camp. Since ancient times, there was only one person who set foot on the peak authority of the order camp as a human. It wasn't Huang Shi. It was the original Qin Weibai. There was information that the original Qin Weibai had the authority of the order camp devil. But there was no information to explain why Qin Weibai had the authority of the devil. What was certain was that this was not caused by a natural breakthrough, nor was it the accumulation of several reincarnations. It should be some kind of unknown natural phenomenon that couldn't be explained. But now, the authority seed in Lin Shi's hands meant that the neutral camp would have a second peak authority of the order camp. The apocalypse. The strongest apocalypse. This was no longer a matter of Lin Shi or the war god realm. In a sense, once the apocalypse that belonged to the neutral camp was born, the entire human race's technological level would usher in a huge leap. Lin Shi was a little excited, a little hesitant, and a little dazed. Amidst the extremely complicated emotions, the world was collapsing slowly. Chaoga City had completely disappeared. He was surrounded by a deep void. The black ocean floating in the void rippled slowly. The volume of the ocean of Sword Chi had shrunk a lot, its sharp edge had become gentle, the power of the divine form 9 deaths had completely dissipated. The large amount of Sword Chi was disappearing, shrinking, and finally converging into a somewhat blurry figure in front of Lin Shi. The faint but extremely clear Sword Chi was constantly circling around his body, hiding his true appearance. He stood there silently, not moving at all, like a sheathed sword without any sharpness. Lin Shi was in a daze. The blurry figure surrounded by Sword Chi lightly smiled. "This is the smell of order." Lin Shi suddenly regained his senses. Only then did he notice that the ocean of Sword Chi had disappeared. Only this figure still existed in his soul world. This was a strand of war god's consciousness left on this Sword Chi. This strand of consciousness had traveled an extremely long distance with the Sword Chi, so it was already a bit blurry, but its presence was extremely clear. He slightly bowed to the blurry figure in front of him and softly said, "Father." Indeed, war god's clone glanced at him, lightly smiled and nodded. "You stole an unknown soul fragment?" Lin Shi grunted, his tone still carried a hint of disbelief. It's the Apocalypse's authority fragment." War god's clone suddenly became silent. After an unknown amount of time, he suddenly raised his hand. The authority seed in Lin Shi's hand directly appeared in War God's clone's hand. Countless knowledge began to impact War God's clone's consciousness. War God's clone silently observed for a long time, then returned the authority seed to Lin Shi. Interesting, the smile in his voice became even more intense. The hint of surprise was very faint, but also extremely joyful. "It suits you very well, fuse with it. No matter what, you will have a place in the future of humanity, father, don't you need it?" Lin Shi suddenly asked. War God was already a peak god of slaughter under the stars. If he also obtained the authority of the apocalypse, his battle prowess would be unimaginable. This seed could directly pave a normal person's path to the apocalypse. Such a temptation, even peak characters couldn't resist. "I have my own path." War God's voice was soft and firm. He paused and continued, "Don't worry about the unknown's influence. This seed is very pure, and the unknown has no chance. You can rest assured to fuse with it." Lin Shi hesitated. He said, "The unknown, he's dead." War God laughed. "Completely dead, he has no possibility of resurrection or rebirth in a host body. But this unknown is stronger than we thought. Although he died in your soul world, with the help of 9 deaths, some changes are still difficult to avoid. At his peak, he can be regarded as the pillar of the shadow camp, so his death will also have an impact on the shadow camp, and then affect the real environment, but that's a small problem. The pollution of Mount Dibbing will slowly disappear by itself. It will take some time, and then you will be responsible for making King Wei complete." "What about Jiang Shangyu?" Lin Shi asked without any disguise. War God's clone seemed to think for a moment. "He is already a shadow creature, this can't be changed. In this world, he is the only shadow creature, so after the death of the unknown, most of the authorities will automatically be attracted to him. The unknown is dead completely, and the soul fragments are also seriously broken. But if he is given time, he still has a great chance to become another unknown. But without the authority of the doomsday, he can't reach the peak. Her Majesty Huang Shi will get rid of him." Lin Shi said softly. "Of course." War God's clone chuckled. "It's just Jiang Shangyu, no need to worry, even if he is a shadow creature. We have made up for our mistakes. Next, we just need to wait for them to return. Jiang Shangyu has lost his 2 bases, and his authority is completely broken. He may still have a fast growth rate, but without the consciousness of the unknown, the real environment will become completely stable. Lin Shi thought silently. He knew very well what it meant for the real environment to be completely stable. The Miracle City was the foundation of the human clan. Because of the existence of the unknown, in the recent period, about decades, the time corridor intentionally or unintentionally let its authority touch the Miracle City, just to conveniently solve the unknown. Now that the unknown had completely fallen, a regrown Zhang Shangyu was no longer a big threat. So the time corridor would reseal the Miracle City, letting the real environment become the absolute dominant. This also meant that the suppression of the real environment on them would be further increased. His martial arts were still there, but his performance was further limited. The series of firepower, technology, and even virtual travel of the apostles would be seriously unimaginably limited. The healing ability of the saint would also be greatly weakened. Everything would return to the cognitive level of the people in the real environment. That was the normal level of the Miracle City. Does the Miracle City need to move again? Lin Shi suddenly asked. This is not something we should pay attention to. War God's clone was stunned for a moment, then slowly said. The relocation of the Miracle City would naturally not be the transfer of a planet, but the change of the entire galaxy. The people of the Miracle City would not feel that they had moved from one end of the starry sky to another position, which involved the technology of space-time folding, and involved a huge amount of resources. The Miracle City had already moved once, so the current Miracle City's observation of the universe and starry sky was in an immature state of folding and distortion. The unknown had completely fallen, but to be on the safe side, it was the safest to move the Miracle City again. However, if the Miracle City was moved again, the astronomy developed by the Miracle City would be subverted again. This was also a huge impact of authority on the real world. As for what to do, it would depend on the internal decision of the time corridor. The surrounding soul world completely collapsed. Everything around the Miracle City began to gradually appear. The mountains on the South American battlefield had completely disappeared. Lin Shi was standing quietly on the water. The War God's clone stood in front of Lin Shi, silently looking at the surrounding environment. This was the planet where he left countless legends back then. I fought here back then. The War God's clone laughed in a low voice. The Miracle City is so beautiful. Lin Shi nodded silently. The mountains and seas of the Miracle City might not be magnificent, but the people here were very beautiful. That kind of free, peaceful, and hopeful spirit was the most beautiful scenery. Real environment. The War God's clone was silent. It should have the appearance of the real environment. His blurry figure began to fade gradually, and finally turned into a wisp of illusory sharpness, completely disappearing. The distant sunset was about to sink into the sea. The whole world seemed to be burning in the gorgeous fiery red light. That authority seed silently integrated into Lin Shi's body. The thought center gave a prompt immediately. Currently in the real environment. Doomsday authority fragment detected, unable to integrate. Test, unable to warn. The thought center was intermittent, and finally was completely suppressed by the real environment. The time corridor's blockade of the Miracle City began. From this moment on, all authority would be reduced to the lowest level. This was the real world. The world of the invincible, and the world of the chosen. End of the 6th volume. The 6th volume. Finally, I've finished writing more than 400 chapters. I said a long time ago that I would explain some things after the end of this volume. But suddenly, I don't know what to say. This volume is the one with the biggest ups and downs in my mind. It's a long story with broken chapters and few chapters. The 6th volume in my mind is not like this. It's not that it's not like this, but it's not like this at all. I want to write a lot of things in this volume. The rise of Xianyuan City in Tiannan, the Burning Legion, Annan, East Island, and especially the Purgatory of Heaven capital, I have designed a lot of climax plots. There is also Snow Country, Heart Calling, and Qin Weibai, the girl, also have a lot of plots. Normally, this volume should have a lot of content. Some things have actually been foreshadowed. But I can't write anymore. It's the kind of thing that I can't write after being warned and educated several times. I can't stand still. But this is what I want to write the most, second only to my love for GG dramas. I can't write these. For a moment, I really don't know how to continue. So my worldview directly and abruptly expanded. Neutrality, order, shadow, starry sky, authority. I have to admit that these things are not in this volume in my plan. The only thing I can be sure of is that in the original plan, the character of Xianyuan Wushang will come out near the end of the last volume. His identity and background will not change, but it will not extend too much. But after all the content in this volume is GG, I can only use Xianyuan Wushang first, and simply try some settings in the next book. The special warfare will not really extend Tianlan to the starry sky. Otherwise, you will be confused, and I will also be confused. From the beginning to the end of the new volume, there should not be too many chapters in the starry sky. Some of the extensions in this volume have given me a lot of things. I will take time to sort out and digest them, and the settings should be changed. Next, it's Earth. This is the main framework, and it can't be changed. Well, because of the number of words, I can't write more. It's less than 5,000 words, so these nonsense words don't count. Chapter 1186. The second before the space was completely solidified, a translucent vortex appeared in the constantly fluctuating air. The blockade of the whole planet had begun. The real environment suppressed the authority in an almost absolute state. The translucent vortex kept shaking and was disappearing quickly. The moment the vortex was about to disappear, he suddenly rushed out of it. The void turbulence was everywhere in the unstable space channel, which was completely filled with the sharpness of the space channel. Such a degree of shuttling was like throwing his body into a blender full of blades, churning it crazily. His entire body had long since been torn to shreds by the spatial turbulence. There were hundreds of shocking wounds on his body, and dark red blood was constantly flowing out. He was in an extremely sorry state, and almost his entire body was lying on the ground, trembling violently. Half a second before the blockade was about to be completed. The rules of the world were temporarily in chaos. Just half a second. All the wounds on his body began to show signs of healing. Countless wounds began to stop bleeding. Trembling under the severe pain, he took a deep breath and laughed somewhat crazily. The blockade was completed. The wounds all over his body remained in a state of healing. Blood kept growing in the wounds. Covered in blood, he looked like a rag doll that had been torn apart and barely stitched up. A gentle and condensed domain enveloped his body. The surrounding scenery began to recede quickly. Jiang Shangyu trembled all over and wanted to try to confuse the rules around him again, but the surrounding space had become incredibly strong. This kind of firmness was in the sense of rules. His domain or sword energy could still make the space slightly broken, but he could hardly feel the rules of the world around him. All his authority was suppressed to a state of being almost sealed. The shadow power in his perception was faint, but it was extremely broken. Jiang Shangyu gritted his teeth, crushed a button on his body, and poured the powder inside into his mouth. The medicine entered his mouth and was swallowed along with the blood. A touch of redness quickly appeared on his face, followed by an extremely clear sense of weakness. He couldn't use his authority to recover from the injury. The only way for him to recover from the injury was the gene medicine within the technical scope of Miracle City. The recovery time was long, and the side effects were obvious. But this was the truth. The truth that Jiang Shangyu was most familiar with but had never gotten. His smile became more and more crazy, and he looked a little happy. He liked this realistic feeling, because it was the feeling he was most familiar with. There were no rules or authority. He was now a person, a pure person. A pure person who had stepped into the shadow world. The scenery on both sides continued to recede. Jiang Shangyu was drowsy. He tried to raise his eyelids and look around, then said hoarsely, "You're walking in the opposite direction." Gu Xingyan was silent for a while, and his body suddenly stopped. The strong domain gently wrapped Jiang Shangyu's body. Gu Xingyan said in a deep voice, "Are you familiar with the surrounding environment?" He was sent here by Jiang Shangyu. Gu Xingyan didn't know where he was at all. Jiang Shangyu took him from Nanyun to South America. Maybe he could directly teleport him to Europe. Gu Xingyan left the battle with serious injuries and a confused face. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself in a barren mountain. He didn't dare to move freely, because he was afraid of something or something else. He chose to wait to meet Jiang Shangyu. Nearly 8 hours later, Jiang Shangyu appeared in front of him with horrible injuries. In the face of this situation, Gu Xingyan's first thought was not to heal Jiang Shangyu, but to continue to run with him. Since they were running, what direction did they need? They just needed to find a direction and rush forward. Go back, go down the mountain. About 20 kilometers away, there is a small town. There is a hospital in the town. My wound needs to be bandaged. Jiang Shangyu struggled to stay awake, and his voice was a little erratic. The gene potion gradually began to work. His body gradually became numb, and the wounds on his body began to heal at a very slow speed. The feeling of weakness became stronger. Where is this place? Gu Xingyan said casually, moving forward according to the direction Jiang Shangyu pointed. It's still in South America, about 400 miles away from our battlefield. Jiang Shangyu coughed. Gu Xingyan's footsteps paused slightly, and he seemed to be hesitating. Jiang Shangyu saw what he was thinking. He forced a smile and said, "Don't worry, they can't find us." "Are you sure?" Gu Xingyan's voice was low and serious. Jiang Shangyu said yes. The suppression of the real environment was getting more and more serious. He could no longer perceive where Lin Shi was now, and Lin Shi could not lock his position either. And under the current suppression, even if he could perceive it, what could he do? Lin Shi had at least one apostle who could use virtual shuttle. Apostles could still use virtual shuttle. But it was impossible to travel freely around the world. Not to mention the world, now it was impossible for them to travel within the whole city. The so-called whole city did not refer to an international metropolis like Huading in Yuzhou, but the size of a small county. Jiang Shangyu lost the authority fragment of Doomsday, so he could not accurately determine how far the apostle could travel with virtual shuttle. But he roughly estimated that it was a distance of a few hundred meters to 1,000 meters. Virtual shuttle in this sense was meaningless, and it was not even as fast as Li Tianlan's full burst of speed. Who is that person? Gu Xingyan finally felt relieved and quickly took Jiang Shangyu down the mountain. He had just broken through, and before he even had time to feel his own state, he was mercilessly attacked, and then Li Tianlan's irresistible suppression, and then Lin Shi's unreasonable pursuit. Gu Xingyan's mind was in a mess. He had a lot of questions to ask, but he didn't know how to ask for a while. Jiang Shangyu was silent for a while and whispered, "Enemy." After a pause, he continued to add, "The kind that will not stop until you die. Unless you are willing to betray the dark shadow." Gu Xingyan fell silent. He still didn't know what the dark shadow was, but some kind of chaotic concept had already penetrated into his soul with his breakthrough. Betray the dark shadow? He couldn't do it now. In other words, his will could betray the dark shadow, but at the moment of betrayal, his will would completely disappear or be completely suppressed, and the power in his body would automatically produce a subpersonality to replace him. Everything about him still existed, except his consciousness. This was equivalent to eternal death. The dark shadow could not betray him. Gu Xingyan rubbed his head with a headache. His thoughts were a little complicated. That person is very strong. I've never even seen him before. He's really strong. Jiang Shangyu was silent for a moment and whispered, "In the current environment, he can be regarded as one of the strongest in the dark world. How is he compared with Li Tianlan?" Gu Xingyan suddenly asked. Jiang Shangyu didn't speak for a while. After a full minute, he smiled softly and said, "Don't mention Li Tianlan. You've seen and experienced Li Tianlan's combat capability with your own eyes. I can responsibly tell you that after this battle, Li Tianlan will be stronger than what we have seen. He is almost the only person who is not suppressed by the environment now. In the current environment, he can hardly be said to be the strongest in the dark world. That level of combat capability, Jiang Shangyu's eyes were deep. It's already a legend. Gu Xingyun was completely silent. His aura also became a little low. Isn't it interesting to break the legend? Jiang Shangyu smiled and murmured, as if talking to himself. He looked at the sky ahead. The setting sun in the distance was about to disappear. The darkness swallowed the last ray of brilliant light between heaven and earth, slowly and firmly enveloping the world. It was like a deep and vast shadow. That was the shadow that Li Tianlan was about to bring to the whole dark world. Deep, gloomy, boundless, overwhelming, almost suffocating. Jiang Shangyu closed his eyes. In the endless weakness, he felt the faint connection between himself and the countless authority seeds in his body. One seed after another slowly floated in his body. That was his biggest ray of light in this darkness. Chapter 1187. The hospital in the small town was completely beyond Gu Xingyun's expectation. According to Jiang Shangyu's instructions, Gu Xingyun took him directly into the hospital morgue. From the morgue, they entered a secret door and found the elevator. After repeatedly entering 4 passwords, the elevator went all the way down. The 6th underground floor was brightly lit. This was an underground research institute filled with a sense of science and technology. A cutting-edge research team took over the treatment of Jiang Shangyu immediately. All kinds of reasonably configured gene potions healed the wound and stabilized the mental state. For a few hours, Gu Xingyun sat silently in the lounge until Jiang Shangyu was pushed out. Jiang Shangyu sat in the wheelchair, and behind him, a dark-skinned local pushed the wheelchair honestly. He looked very simple and honest. We have to go home right away. Before Gu Xingyun could react, Jiang Shangyu spoke immediately. His voice was clear and tough. We have to do it as soon as possible. Gu Xingyun glanced at him. He was a little tired and a little confused, looking mentally and physically exhausted. He rubbed his forehead and said lightly, "What's the reason?" "Li Guangtu can't hold on for too long." Jiang Shangyu said calmly, "We have to save him from Li Tianlan. Dong Wang doesn't have such a good temper now. In other words, his temper has never been very good. No matter what, we shouldn't test his patience." "Save him?" Gu Xingyun sneered subconsciously. "With us? With our current state, how can we fight with Li Tianlan again?" Jiang Shangyu's injury was just barely stabilized under the effect of the gene potion. The so-called stabilization did not mean that he had recovered a certain degree of combat capability. It just meant that his injury would not continue to deteriorate, but he would not be weak. Without the rule of shadow, with the effect of the gene potion, Jiang Shangyu's body would become weaker. His injury this time was extremely serious. Even if he used the rule of shadow to heal some of the injuries that were difficult to recover before the real environment was completely blocked, he still needed to slowly recuperate in the following period of time. In this state, to save Li Guangtu from Li Tianlan? Was this a joke? Of course not with us. Jiang Shangyu smiled. He was a little short of breath. Since we can't do anything about force for the time being, we have to look for a breakthrough in other ways. We can't pressure Li Tianlan, but someone can pressure Xianyuan City and Emperor Dong's palace greatly. Gu Xingyun's eyes suddenly flashed. To Yuzhou. Jiang Shangyu said calmly, "Find Li Huaqing." Gu Xingyun was silent and did not speak for a while. Obviously, he was considering the possibility of Li Huaqing helping them. There was no doubt that when they couldn't suppress Li Tianlan by force, they had to turn to other forces. Currently, only Li Huaqing had this power. He had enough power to give Xianyuan City and the entire Emperor Dong's palace enough pressure. Because in his hands were the resources of the entire Zhongzhou state. But why did Li Huaqing save Li Guangtu? The battle had ended a long time ago. Gu Xingyan was outside Zhongzhou State, but he had learned a lot of information about Zhongzhou State from the side. Gu Xianyan was Qin Weibai's pawn in Kunlun City. Phoenix Pavilion was exposed. Jiang Shangyu even secretly intervened in Phoenix Pavilion. Normally, this series of news was enough to make Gu Xingyan furious and even frightened and helpless. But now he and Jiang Shangyu had joined hands, and there was no point in investigating Jiang Shangyu's intervention in Phoenix Pavilion. What he was most concerned about now was the situation of Kunlun City after Phoenix Pavilion was exposed. At present, there seemed to be some chance for things to turn around. It was said that Li Huaqing suppressed Li Tianlan at the meeting and temporarily delayed this matter. In this way, it seemed to explain some of Li Huaqing's attitude. But it was his attitude to keep Kunlun City. He was really willing to put pressure on Li Tianlan. Save Li Guangtu? We can give it a try. Jiang Shanyu said, the possibility of success is very high. The current situation of Zhongzhou State has reached an urgent time to change. Li Huaqing also needs a new balance to continue to lay out the layout in the next 5 years. Li Tianlan defeated the three of us and further proved his invincible status, but it will also further make Zhongzhou State fear him. I learned about the recent movements of the parliament. I'm responsible for the exposure of Phoenix Pavilion. I'm sorry for what I did before. But Li Huaqing's attitude is very self-explanatory. He wants to keep Kunlun City. This is very clear. Obviously, Li Huaqing wants to use you to balance Emperor Dong's palace. But with all due respect, you are not enough, far from enough, just by relying on Kunlun City. In this case, the Jiang family and the Purgatory of Heaven capital will become Li Huaqing's new bargaining chips. The combination of our three parties is enough to shock the whole dark world, and naturally it will cause an uproar inside Zhongzhou State. Now inside Zhongzhou State, the power contrast of the special warfare system is too big and too sharp. You, me, and Li Guangtu have the capital to fight against Emperor Dong's palace. Li Huaqing can't see this. He has a considerable possibility to further balance Li Tianlan with our help. So the attitude of the academics can be expected. As for the Prince Group, there is no need to say more. At this stage, as long as Emperor Dong's palace wants, they will definitely oppose it. And an overly powerful Emperor Dong's palace, the Wang family of Beihai also doesn't want to see it. If we cooperate with the Purgatory of Heaven capital, with the complicated grievances between the Purgatory of Heaven capital and the Li family, Emperor Dong's palace will definitely focus on us next. For this reason, the academics will also be happy to see us attract the main hatred of Emperor Dong's palace. Wang Tianzong needs to heal, Wang Xingxiao needs to grow, and Beihai needs to stabilize. What they need most now is time. There is one thing you haven't considered. Gu Xingyan suddenly said coldly. Jiang Shangyu raised his eyebrows. What if Li Tianlan completely turns against him? If Li Tianlan completely turns against him, Emperor Dong's palace would not accept any pressure. Jiang Shangyu thought about it seriously and finally shook his head. It's impossible. A dog will jump over a wall when it's in a hurry. Gu Xingyan sneered, and his eyes flickered. So Zhongzhou State won't really drive Li Tianlan into a hurry. This is not what Li Huaqing wants. He just wants balance. Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace are far from having the strength to turn against each other. Zhongzhou State can't really force Emperor Dong's palace to the opposite side. Jiang Shangyu took a deep look at Gu Xingyan. So the biggest possibility is that the academics, the Prince Group, and the Southeast Group will support the Special Warfare Group this time, but at the same time, they will also give Emperor Dong's palace enough compensation, enough to satisfy Li Tianlan. He looked at Gu Xingyan with some sympathy. You may need to make some sacrifices. Gu Xingyan seemed to think of something, and his face suddenly became extremely ugly. Chapter 1188. The commotion in Emperor Dong's palace continued in the night. The uneasiness and turbulence in the world were slowly fermenting. In front of the huge castle, on the luxurious hot spring square, the 100-meter-high black sword stone sculpture still stood quietly. Li Tianlan stood at the highest point of the hilt of the giant sword, looking up at the night sky. He had been silent for a long time. The water column of the fountain rushed to the sky with great force, and the water curtain was rendered into dazzling colors by the light. Li Tianlan stood there, as if he was stepping on a rainbow. The sound of the media push on the mobile phone rang almost continuously. All the major media outlets were constantly sending news. There were indeed a lot of things that happened today. In the morning, the heat of the sword energy storm that swept through Yuzhou City had not subsided. The rainbow that had crossed thousands of kilometers from Nanyuan province to Yuzhou had appeared in the sight of countless people. Then came the unprecedented super earthquake in South America. The shaking of the continental plates had affected half of South America in a day. The huge natural disaster had not subsided yet. The whole world saw the blue full moon. It was already night in Zhongzhou State. The faint blue moon covered the stars over Zhongzhou State with the light that could destroy everything. On the other side of the world, the sun and the moon were in the same sky under the daytime. There was no authoritative explanation for these anomalies. These had become hot topics in various countries. As one of the people involved in these things, Li Tianlan's focus had now shifted to the whole world. The world had become completely different. He could clearly feel this. This difference seemed to be some kind of firmness beyond his cognition. When the blue full moon appeared in the sky and the sword energy swept over Shenyuan City like a sky curtain, Li Tianlan could almost clearly feel the changes in the world and himself. The invisible space seemed to be reorganized in a sense. The darkness grew deeper. The stars grew brighter. The earth grew wider. As for himself, his perception of the sword energy grew sharper. It was an indescribable feeling. He seemed to be able to control each sword energy more easily and further exert the power of each sword energy. The 24 moves of sword, the immortality seal, his own unique skills, and every unique skill that he could simulate could become more powerful in his hands. The unique skills seemed to become a certain situation in his hands. And now he had mastered part of the essence. The essence of unique skills, sword energy, and sword light was sharpness. Breaking the sharpness of a sword. The world was still changing little by little. Li Tianlan's own changes began to become more and more clear. He didn't know what was going on, but he was sure that he was at least a little stronger than before the blue moon appeared. This increase in combat effectiveness was not very big, but it was an obvious improvement. This small step had brought him closer to the end of martial arts in his mind. However, he did not know whether this increase in strength was because his understanding of the way of the sword had deepened imperceptibly, or because the world had silently but extremely obvious changes that had occurred. If it was the former, Li Tianlan would accept it. If it was the former, Li Tianlan would accept it. Wisps of sword qi filled every inch of space in Emperor Dong's palace. The sword qi was everywhere, but it also seemed that it never existed. The faintly discernible sharpness spread throughout Emperor Dong's palace with Li Tianlan as the center. In this state, every corner of Emperor Dong's palace was under Li Tianlan's control. He could hear the elites of Emperor Dong's palace talking about the recent 10,000 swords unsheathing. He could hear some people talking about the earthquake in South America. Some people were looking forward to the glorious future of Emperor Dong's palace. He could feel the night wind blowing through the treetops and the water. He could also see a group of ants crawling to their nests in the jungle under the night sky thousands of meters away. His combat effectiveness was really close to the upper limit of the real environment. Within the scope of his sword energy, he was completely omniscient and omnipresent. If he wanted to, he could even distort every sword energy in Emperor Dong's palace and make countless sword energy doppelgangers fill every space of Emperor Dong's palace in an instant. Li Tianlan turned the sword energy all over Emperor Dong's palace into his own eyes and carefully studied every corner of Emperor Dong's palace. A few hours ago, all the people in Emperor Dong's palace had returned to their residences under his order. Emperor Dong's palace still maintained the appearance of the sword energy sweeping over Xianyuan city. Every leaf, every twig, every weed, every flower petal, every stone. Above his head, everything changed slightly when the sword chi swept across the sky like a canopy of the sky. Everything in the world, all the sharp edges and corners, seemed to point in a certain direction. Actually, the direction was not important. What was important was that when these edges and corners were pieced together, they formed a grand and indistinguishable pattern, but it really did exist. The pattern continued to extend from Emperor Dong's palace to Xianyuan city, Tiannan, and even the whole world. With Li Tianlan's current ability, he could only see a small part of the pattern in Emperor Dong's palace under the cover of his sword chi. But even this small part of the pattern was incomprehensible to him. The only thing he could be sure of was that this huge pattern was definitely related to the sword Dao. He stood silently at the highest point of Emperor Dong's palace. Slowly and carefully, he imprinted the pattern in his mind bit by bit. He kept breaking it down and thinking. This temporarily incomprehensible scene became clearer and clearer in his mind. When Li Tianlan completely came to his senses, he suddenly raised his eyebrows slightly and looked down at the bottom of the giant sword. Through the colorful light of the water, a slim figure was standing quietly under the fountain. She was also looking up at him with an expressionless face. Mochizuki Song. This queen of darkness in the dark world had been very low-key since she was brought back to Emperor Dong's palace by Li Tianlan. She had basically recovered from the injuries she suffered in the battle in North Sea. With Xianyuan Wushang's existence, most of the internal injuries accumulated in Mochizuki Song's body over the years had also recovered. No matter what his identity was, at least in terms of professional ability as a doctor, he could beat all his peers in the world. After Mochizuki Song's injuries recovered, she did not overreact. Most of the time, she was so low-key that it was almost as if she did not exist. Li Tianlan thought about it. He did not stay in Emperor Dong's palace for a long time. In his impression, when he was here, he did not seem to see Mochizuki Song step out of her room. "What's the matter?" Li Tianlan asked calmly. Mochizuki Song looked at him silently. After 2 seconds of silence, she said lightly, "I'm here to say goodbye to His Majesty." Li Tianlan lowered his head and looked down. "Go home." Mochizuki Song's eyes drifted and she said flatly, "I've been out for a long time. I should go back to Eastern Europe." Chapter 1189. Water splashed from the air, splashing a crystal light. Silently, Li Tianlan appeared beside Wang Wuxianga and said casually, "Why do you want to go back all of a sudden?" Wang Wuxianga suddenly turned her head. She looked at Li Tianlan beside her, and then at the huge black sword in the center of the fountain square. There was still Li Tianlan's shadow at the top of the huge sword. As the wind blew, the shadow gradually faded and disappeared. Wang Wuxianga's eyes flickered slightly. Her real strength was very close to the peak of the invincible realm, and she was an invincible realm expert who focused on swordsmanship. Among the 12 super masters of the Samsara Palace in the past, even now, she deserved to be the first in terms of strength. Her combat capability was definitely above that of saint and military counselor. In today's dark world, Wang Wuxianga, who used to be flaming fire, could definitely be regarded as the top swordsmanship expert. But at the moment when Li Tianlan moved and appeared beside her, she didn't feel any sword energy. There was no sword energy, sword intent, or sword light. The surrounding space was stable and flat. Therefore, not only in her sight, but also in her perception, Li Tianlan's appearance was extremely abrupt. In this state, Li Tianlan was like, as if he had become a part of the air. Extreme nothingness, but absolutely real. Wang Wuxianga's heart tightened slightly, and even her scalp was a little numb. This was not an emotion like fear, or defense and vigilance. She believed that Li Tianlan had no malice toward her. This emotion that shouldn't be present at the moment was the almost instinctive nervousness of an expert. Just at that moment, if Li Tianlan wanted to, Wang Wuxianga knew very well that she would be dead now. Not long ago, Li Tianlan had killed Zhu, an invincible realm killer in the Dark World, with one blow at Huading Airport, which shocked the whole Dark World. This had proved that Li Tianlan had the strength to kill an invincible realm expert in an instant. Wang Wuxiang's strength was much stronger than Zhu's. But this was not the most important thing. The most important thing was Li Tianlan's action. Compared with the horrifying blow at Huading Airport, Li Tianlan was not as strong as Huading Airport. Now Li Tianlan didn't need any so-called momentum. He didn't need to accumulate strength or wave the sword. He was calm and natural. Wang Wuxiang clearly realized a fact. If Li Tianlan wanted to kill him, he didn't need to do anything at all. He just needed to move. From this point of view, stepping on an ant and killing an invincible realm expert only required a slight movement. Li Tianlan didn't even need to gather any sword energy. A random sword chi of the fire-flaming realm, the ice-condensing realm, or even the chi-controlling realm could directly kill an invincible realm expert. Because no one could see his movements anymore. Eyes can't see. He couldn't sense it. He appeared beside her like air. It wasn't fast, but it was extremely sudden. This was no longer a sneak attack or not. This kind of abruptness had at least exceeded the reaction speed of an invincible realm expert. Since he came out of the desert, Li Tianlan seemed to have been making progress at a crazy speed. He approached the peak, stood at the peak, and now he had almost surpassed the peak. In Mochizuki-sang's eyes, this silent step was truly unfathomable. Mochizuki-sang took a deep breath to calm himself down and said, "The situation in Europe is a little chaotic. I've been away for too long. Now that I've recovered, it's time to go back. The European continent now has the Snowdance core. No matter how chaotic the situation is, the Dark Knights will not have any problems." Li Tianlan smiled faintly and stepped out of the fountain square. The current situation in Europe could be said to be a chaotic mess. The decisive battle in North Sea had directly shaken the structure and foundation of the Dark World. The headquarters of Sanctum was directly attacked by the Dark Knights and Rothschild and suffered heavy losses. The old man, who could be said to be supreme in the spiritual field, finally had to choose to temporarily leave the headquarters of Sanctum. The Holy Disarmament Corps was almost completely broken up. The Dark Knights and Rothschild began to expand after stabilizing their footing. The entire European Union was in turmoil. The shadow throne formed by the European Union was even more turbulent. In the final battle of Beihai, Wang Xingxiao's strong rise at the last moment almost wiped out Beihai. Hostile forces. Who were those hostile forces? Almost all the elite forces of the Dark World were gathered there, and most of the second-class forces were swept away. The current European continent was like a deep pool of muddy water. The few second-rate forces that did not participate in the North Sea showdown saw an opportunity to continue growing stronger. Meanwhile, after the elite forces were wiped out, the leaderless second-rate forces began to band together. The Holy Disarmament Corps was planning to return to Sanctum. Rothschild, who had been silent for several years, also began to move. They joined forces with the Dark Knights to attack Sanctum, but there was no cooperation in external expansion. It was said that Paul, the current patriarch of Rothschild, had begun to integrate the forces in the Shadow Throne. The Dark Knights remained calm and collected, but some countries in the European Union had begun to test the attitude of the Dark Knights. In addition, the Knights Templars had risen suddenly and vaguely had the tendency to become another superpower in Europe. It was only after the start of the decisive battle in North Sea that the Dark World discovered that the Knights Templars had already left Sanctum and started to establish themselves. The existence of Moraid made everyone not dare to underestimate the strength of the Knights Templars. The current European continent could be said to be surging with undercurrents. Although various forces maintained a certain degree of restraint, small-scale conflicts and confrontations occurred all the time. Mochizuki-sang's injury had basically recovered. Her return was self-evident to the Dark Knights. The Dark Knights need me now. Mochizuki-sang walked silently beside Li Tianlan. And it's not suitable for the Dark Knights to stay where they are. Now the European continent is very chaotic, and there are opportunities in troubled times. No matter from which point of view, the expansion of the Dark Knights is imperative, and it's also good for everyone. Li Tianlan walked silently and did not speak. Mochizuki Song twitched the corner of her mouth and continued, and it is said that Wang Xiaoyao has returned to Snow Country. His power in Snow Country is very strong. I'm afraid that the Snowdance Corps won't have an easy time, right? Wang Xiaoyao is not a concern. Li Tianlan shook his head. Let's wait and stay here for a while. There are a lot of things to do recently. When I'm done, I'll go to Europe with you. You're going to Europe? Mochizuki Song frowned slightly. Am I not welcome? Li Tianlan turned his head and glanced at her with a faint smile. The night was like water. The two gradually left the fountain square and walked aimlessly in the quiet night of Emperor Dong's palace. Mochizuki Song was silent for a long time before she slowly said, I can wait for you in Europe. The expansion of Emperor Dong's palace was imperative. East Island, Zhongzhou State, Tiannan, Li Tianlan now had enough strength, so he naturally needed enough power. Today's Emperor Dong's palace was very strong, but it was strong in high-end combat capability, the absolute cohesion that only belonged to the new power, and the endless wealth brought by the flourishing age fund. But the foundation of Emperor Dong's palace was not deep. Xianyuan City was the absolute core of Emperor Dong's palace. And the Jiangxia province of Zhongzhou State could only be regarded as half of it. The giant group could only be regarded as an absolutely reliable ally. Li Tianlan had money, people, and strength. Naturally, he needed to turn the wealth in his hands into real influence and expand his foundation. What Emperor Dong's palace would do next was completely predictable. It was inevitable to unify Tiannan, but it was certainly not enough. The rise of the new group was equivalent to expanding the influence of Emperor Dong's palace in Zhongzhou State. The chaos in East Island gave Li Tianlan the right to intervene in East Island. The Snowdance Corps in his hands could target Snow Country with Wulan State as the center. Was that enough? Not enough, far from enough. With Li Tianlan's current status and combat capability in the Dark World, he was fully qualified to ask for more things. Europe, America, and more places. As long as Li Tianlan was still there, Emperor Dong's palace would sooner or later extend to every corner of the world, just like the Wang family of Beihai in its peak. Although Li Tianlan was entangled by a lot of things now, he was obviously already thinking about it. And because of the relationship between the Dark Knights and Emperor Dong's palace, it was also a very reasonable choice for Li Tianlan to intervene in the affairs of Europe next. Wang Wuxiang thought for a moment and made a clear statement. I'll go back and arrange it. Then she didn't finish her words. Li Tianlan interrupted her directly. Stay a little longer. Li Tianlan said slowly. His tone was very calm, very natural, very calm, and yet it was not to be resisted. Wang Wuxiang's heart sank slightly for no reason. Li Tianlan's meaning was hard to guess, but his attitude was extremely obvious. He didn't want her to leave Emperor Dong's palace now. Under that seemingly peaceful attitude, there was an invisible toughness. She came to say goodbye to Li Tianlan. And Li Tianlan's answer was no. It could be said to be an order, or even an extremely tough request. Wang Wuxiang narrowed her eyes and looked at Li Tianlan. She said word by word, Your Majesty, are you going to imprison me here? You're exaggerating. Li Tianlan shook his head and said in a calm voice. Wang Wuxiang then realized that although the two seemed to be strolling, she was the only one who really stepped forward from beginning to end. And Li Tianlan, who was beside her, didn't move forward at all. Every time he moved forward, he was in a state of flickering on the spot. As the two moved forward, she was constantly changing places with her sword energy. Obviously, Li Tianlan seemed to have made some slight breakthroughs in swordsmanship tonight, and he was silently adapting to his strength after the breakthrough. In this state, Li Tianlan didn't need to take a step at all. His body could appear in any corner of Emperor Dong's palace at any time, and he could also disappear in any corner of Emperor Dong's palace at will. Like a ghost. Or, like a god. Everywhere. Wang Wuxiang's eyes became more and more solemn. I don't know if you found it, but I can tell you clearly. Li Tianlan's figure slowly moved forward and flickering again and again. The world has changed. Although I don't know what has changed, it has changed. Until tonight, I began to seriously think about a problem that I ignored before. Or rather, I'm not neglecting anything, but in the spiritual realm, I'm subconsciously being guided to not think about certain things. But the world has changed. In the spiritual domain, my guidance is no longer effective. He turned his head and looked at Wang Wuxiang, whose body was quietly tense. I need an answer. What answer? Wang Wuxiang's body was extremely tense. You are flaming fire. Li Tianlan said, before Snow Country, the master of Samsara Palace and the commander of Dark Knights in my impression were lovers. And you and the commander of Dark Knights were lovers. So for a long time, the master of Samsara Palace I knew should be you, right? Wang Wuxiang didn't speak or even breathe. At some time, in a certain period, you were the master of Samsara Palace, or in other words, the substitute of the master of Samsara Palace. I saw you in Snow Country. You, Little Bai, Palace Master, all three of you were there. At that time, you were you. And the Palace Master was also the Palace Master. Her aura was very strong. She was at the peak of the invincible realm. So at that time, you were you, and the Palace Master was the Palace Master. From that time on, my understanding of the Master of Samsara Palace had already been wrong. But I didn't know your strength, so I didn't find it. After the Eternal Sword in Mormons, I knew your strength and your relationship with the Dark Knights. But I don't know why I didn't think about it. Until today, until just now, I didn't think about it. You are the Master of Samsara Palace I knew before. There is no doubt about it. Li Tianlan looked at flaming fire with calm and deep eyes. Then who is the master of Samsara Palace in Mormons who controlled the Eternal Sword to severely injure Wang Tianzong and cause his death? Wang Wuxiang stopped. Her body was stiff on the spot. She didn't breathe or answer. There was dead silence around. Li Tianlan waited for a while and suddenly laughed. It seems that this question is hard to answer, right? Wang Wuxiang was still silent. It doesn't matter. Li Tianlan said blandly, you can take your time to think about it here. Tell me when you figure it out. Chapter 1190. Wang Wuxiang lowered her head. From an angle that Li Tianlan couldn't see, her face was a little pale. Li Tianlan asked a question that she couldn't answer at all. She was the master of Samsara Palace that Li Tianlan once knew. Who was the real master of Samsara Palace? Why could she give up everything for Li Tianlan and even give everything of Samsara Palace to Emperor Dong's palace? The Eternal Sword over Mormons was so gorgeous and hasty. What kind of feelings did the meteor-like light have when it pierced Wang Tianzong's chest? Li Tianlan had never thought about this question before. His mind was very clear most of the time, but when it came to this question, his mind would always deviate unconsciously. This question was like a blind spot hidden in the deepest part of his mind. He rarely touched it. Even if he touched it occasionally, he would pass it quietly. Until the final battle in Beihai, when Wang Wuxiang stood in front of him as flaming fire and the Queen of Darkness, Li Tianlan didn't think about this question. It wasn't until the sword energy swept through the world tonight that he clearly felt the beginning of the change of the world. His mind suddenly became completely clear. The question that he hadn't thought about for more than 2 years suddenly became extremely clear and brought great doubts. Who was the fallen master of Samsara Palace? How important this question was, Li Tianlan couldn't explain it in a short time. He was very sure that if he had left the border and gone to Huading, without seeing Qin Weibai or contacting Samsara Palace, his life would have been different. His growth might still be fast. He could get the support of a small part of the Li family's power. But he couldn't fight against Li Kuangtu's purgatory of heaven capital. Without Samsara Palace, there were only two directions left in his life. The first was to seek refuge in the Wang family of Beihai and marry Wang Yuetong. The second was to return to the giant group and marry Dongqing Rushi. From Li Tianlan's personal point of view, neither of the two choices was a good choice. They were the directions of compromise under helplessness and the directions outside of Li Honghe's plan. Li Honghe's plan was to let him take over the purgatory of heaven capital as he grew up. But the old man obviously underestimated Li Guangtu's ability to control the purgatory of heaven capital. Therefore, without the Samsara Palace, everything that Li Tianlan faced would be very difficult. The Samsara Palace gave him a third choice. This mysterious force, even after its destruction, had been of great help to Li Tianlan from the beginning. The man Qin Weibai chose. With this identity alone, he began to contact various forces in Zhongzhou state with a relatively detached identity, and was qualified to negotiate with the southeast, the giant group, and even the purgatory of heaven capital. He didn't need to join the Wang family of Beihai, return to the giant group, or start his life with difficulty under the rules of these two superpowers. He didn't join any force, but the Samsara Palace had been his help from the beginning to the end. His growth was in perfect sync with the plan of the Samsara Palace. The eve of the decisive battle of the Snow Empire was an extremely sensitive time. At that time, Li Tianlan had grown to a strong enough level. He defeated Wang Xingshao, Gu Hanzhan, Jiang Shangyu, and others in the joint maneuver of the Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy. He almost single-handedly suppressed all the young experts in Zhongzhou state and became the number one among the young generation in Zhongzhou state. His strength at that time was completely beyond his age. Although he was young at that time, the strength of the invincible realm could already stand at the top of the dark world and look down on most people. At that time, the Li family was ready to make trouble. Li Honghe left the border. The Li family's strongest base camp, Jiangzhe, began to return. The connection between Li Tianlan and the giant group was further deepened. The East Emperor Palace also had the most basic framework. As the youngest invincible realm expert in the Dark World, Li Tianlan was nominated by Wang Tianzong to become the youngest marshal in Zhongzhou state and the commander of the Snowdance Corps. He rose to the sky in one step and shone brightly. At that time, everyone knew Li Tianlan's future. But there were not many big shots who were really optimistic about the East Emperor Palace. To some extent, it was because of Li Tianlan's position. To put it more clearly, it was all because of the existence of the Samsara Palace. The Samsara Palace brought great help to Li Tianlan's personal development in the early stage, but it also brought a lot of resistance to the East Emperor Palace at that time. Li Tianlan could become the youngest marshal in Zhongzhou state at that time. But if the East Emperor Palace wanted to get a chance for rapid development, it depended on the choice of the Samsara Palace. This was pure wisdom, not influenced by personal feelings. Even Dongqing Wudi, who was loyal to Li Tianlan, and even Li Honghe at that time, could see and acquiesce to this. Zhongzhou state was waiting for the Samsara Palace's choice. Waiting for the further deepening of the cooperation between the Samsara Palace and Zhongzhou state. At that time, Li Tianlan was too young, and he didn't even know all this in hindsight. The Samsara Palace, which had become an obstacle to the development of the East Emperor Palace, had no choice. The chaos in Snow Country was vigorous. Mormon's eternal sword was unforgettable. The Samsara Palace completely became history, and all the shadows of that era fell at the same time. In the glory of the new era, Li Tianlan, who already had the strength to stand at the top of the dark world, directly went to the peak. The East Emperor Palace began to develop rapidly in Tiannan. Just like what Li Tianlan once said. After the chaos in Snow Country, no one was qualified to let him focus on the overall situation. Because he was the overall situation. The 2 years in the desert were a crucial accumulation and precipitation of his personal martial arts and strength, as well as the precipitation of his personal heart. His thinking was transforming. His sword Dao was improving with every passing moment. In more than 2 years, he left the desert prison. Although he had not really entered the invincible realm, he was already truly invincible in the world. Situt Sangyue, known as the hidden god of Zhongzhou State, joined the East Emperor Palace with Sai City. Saint, who was once known as the first super master of the Samsara Palace, also joined the East Emperor Palace. The East Emperor Palace became Emperor Dong's palace. What brought the greatest shock to the outside world was not the two deputy palace masters of the Invincible Realm. It was the Flourishing Age Fund that also merged into Emperor Dong's palace. It was the only true top neutral wealthy family in Zhongzhou State. The Flourishing Age Fund was comparable to any super consortium in the world. Han Donglu, who was like a legend in the financial world. Military counselor of the Samsara Palace. In a sense, his joining was even more shocking than Saint and Situt Sangyue joining Emperor Dong's palace. Military counselor was not in the Invincible Realm. In terms of combat capability, he naturally could not compare with the two deputy palace masters of the Invincible Realm. But the addition of the Flourishing Age Fund made up for the shortcomings of Emperor Dong's palace. They were all shortcomings. Money, human resources, intelligence channels, and even talent echelons. The Flourishing Age Fund had everything that should and should not have. What would Emperor Dong's palace be like without the Flourishing Age Fund? It was a regional force with absolute powerful combat capability. In the entire Dark World, it was probably a first-class force, and it was a regional one. But what would Emperor Dong's palace be like with the Flourishing Age Fund? With the Flourishing Age Fund, Emperor Dong's palace instantly became a super force that could compare with Rothschild in terms of wealth, the 6 groups of Zhongzhou State in terms of human resources, the Wang family of Beihai in terms of experts, and the Jiang family of South America in terms of intelligence. Now, everyone could say that the foundation of Emperor Dong's palace was slightly insufficient, but no one dared to say that the foundation of Emperor Dong's palace was not stable enough, and no one dared to say that Emperor Dong's palace was not strong enough. Such a Emperor Dong's palace was a real super giant in the current Dark World, no, even in the previous era. As long as Li Tianlan was given time, he could completely build a unique dynasty in the Dark World. And the foundation of Emperor Dong's palace was built on the bones of the Samsara Palace. How could such a Samsara Palace and such a palace master not be important to Li Tianlan? Li Tianlan didn't even know who she was now. He was sure that there was a huge secret hidden in this matter that he didn't know, but he didn't know what it was. But Mochizuki Song knew. You've been running away from something. Li Tianlan's voice was calm. Since I brought you back, you rarely go out of your room, and you even need someone to send you 3 meals a day. You may not be familiar with most of the people here, but there are always people you are familiar with, or even very familiar with. Deputy Palace Master Saint is now in Shenyuan City. The Chief Administrative Counselor was also here before he went to Yuzhou. Horsewoman is also here. You are all former super masters of the Samsara Palace, but you act as if you don't know them at all. Why? Are you running away from me? Or are you running away from them? I don't like them. Mochizuki Song finally spoke in a low and hoarse voice. Li Tianlan smiled casually. That can be a reason. What about Little Bai? Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and looked at Mochizuki Song. You used to be with Little Bai for 7 years, and you were almost inseparable. Little Bai also told me before that in her heart, you are not only a bodyguard, but also a friend, or even a best friend. Before Little Bai went to Yuzhou, you didn't see each other either. Why? Mochizuki Song suddenly raised her head and stared at Li Tianlan. There were countless emotions in her eyes. Some were angry, some were mocking, some were in a trance, and even a trace of hatred. Finally, it turned into an extremely miserable grievance. Li Tianlan was stunned. Mochizuki Song lowered her head again and said nothing. Tell me. The extremely complicated expression reappeared crazily in Li Tianlan's mind. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. Who is the master of Samsara Palace? Why don't you ask her? Mochizuki Song gritted her teeth. Ask my former boss? Li Tianlan paused and said nothing. He just looked at Mochizuki Song and narrowed his eyes. What? Mochizuki Song sneered. You don't want to embarrass her, so you come to bully me? I didn't expect this to come out of your mouth. Blame? It seems that the relationship between you two is not that good. Li Tianlan said slowly. Mochizuki Song gritted her teeth and looked up at Li Tianlan. You idiot. I want an answer. Li Tianlan said quietly. I'm free. That's what my boss told me at that time. I didn't join Emperor Dong's palace, and I'm not obliged to answer your question. I'm free. Mochizuki Song gritted her teeth and said coldly. Really? Li Tianlan asked indifferently. Mochizuki Song paused slightly and said in a low voice, I want to go back to Europe. Stay here. Li Tianlan's voice was flat. Stay for a while, or tell me the answer. Your Majesty seems determined to imprison me. Mochizuki Song sneered. Whatever you think. Li Tianlan said indifferently. What if I have to go? Mochizuki Song stared at Li Tianlan and suddenly said seriously. You can't go. Li Tianlan shook his head. And where can you go? It's just a simple question. All I need is an answer. Are you willing to give up the dark nights for this answer? Mochizuki Song looked at Li Tianlan coldly, and her eyes became more and more aggrieved. Tell me when you've made up your mind. Then, you'll be truly free. Li Tianlan's figure slowly disappeared in the night. Mochizuki Song stood where she was and looked at the place where Li Tianlan's figure disappeared. She was silent for a long time. Answer? Of course, she knew the answer. But she couldn't imagine what would happen if Li Tianlan knew the so-called answer. She didn't know if Li Tianlan could bear that kind of blow. The night wind blew past her. Mochizuki Song subconsciously tightened her clothes and said nothing. Chapter 1191. The office on the 5th floor of the castle was brightly lit. Xiao Mahai wrote the last name on the document in front of him, then quietly looked at the handwriting on the document, frowning in thought. As the supervisor of Emperor Dong's palace appointed by Li Tianlan, he was once a general of the desert prison in Zhongzhou State. He was seriously injured and dying in the bloody battle in the desert. His martial arts were almost destroyed by Gu Qianxuan. But like Moon Gaze and Song, because of Xianyuan Wushang's existence, Xiao Mahai's injury recovered extremely fast. Not only did his injury recover, but his body also recovered a certain degree of vitality when receiving treatment. His strength that was close to the peak of the thunder-shocking realm recovered, and he even had the hope to set foot in the half-step invincible realm in his lifetime. It was definitely a blessing in disguise. For this general who had served him for 2 years under great pressure and countless ridicule, Li Tianlan gave him almost absolute trust. Xiao Mahai expressed his attitude toward Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan also expressed his attitude toward Xiao Mahai. As soon as Xiao Mahai's family was brought to Xianyuan City, Li Tianlan had already arranged a place for him. He was the chief seneschal of Emperor Dong's palace and also the second chief executive of Emperor Dong's palace. If the chief executive's power was limited to the internal affairs of Emperor Dong's palace, then the second chief executive's power was enough to cover all the properties of Emperor Dong's palace. He could be said to be the absolute core of the palace. The first chief administrative officer of Emperor Dong's palace was the military counselor. There were 2 deputy administrators. One of them was Xiao Mahai, and the other was the chief administrator of Xianyuan City. He was also the first candidate to succeed Ning Qiancheng as the mayor of Xianyuan City in the future. He was just a nominal member of Emperor Dong's palace, and his role was to establish the position of Emperor Dong's palace in Tiannan. So strictly speaking, Li Tianlan was the only second chief executive in the real sense. The development of Emperor Dong's palace was very short. During the period of development, the internal hierarchy was not obvious. This could improve the cohesion of Emperor Dong's palace to a certain extent, but it was also easy to cause chaos. Li Tianlan was the palace master, chief administrative officer, military advisor. Saint, hidden deity, and Li Shi were the three deputy palace masters. This was a clear hierarchy. Further down, the positions of Li Beidian and the others were a little blurry. As the mayor of Xianyuan City, Ning Qianqing's position in Emperor Dong's palace was also very subtle. Li Tianlan couldn't do anything about it. After he returned to Emperor Dong's palace, he intentionally or unintentionally avoided the main personnel framework of Emperor Dong's palace at this stage. Except for the appointment of several deputy palace masters and military counselor, the most important appointment was the appointment of Xiao Mahai. No matter what Li Tianlan meant to the outside world by putting Xiao Mahai in an important position, at least it was obvious that he attached great importance to the general director. Therefore, Xiao Mahai, who began to adapt to his new position as soon as he recovered from his injury, adapted very well. He handled the internal affairs of Emperor Dong's palace in an orderly manner, and he also did a good job in assisting the military counselor in dealing with external affairs. While everyone in Emperor Dong's palace was discussing the abnormal phenomena that day, Xiao Mahai was the only one who locked himself in his office and dealt with his work. Blue moon? He didn't see it at all. What really caught his attention was the list of forms in front of him, as well as a list that was constantly being drafted, deleted, and added. The name list was gradually perfected after constant editing. Xiao Mahai stretched, walked to the water dispenser, and poured a glass of water, intending to wrap up today's work. Li Tianlan's figure appeared in his sight at the moment he turned around. Xiao Mahai's palm trembled slightly. After seeing who it was, he breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "Your Majesty, good evening." Li Tianlan casually responded with a hum. He leaned his body and pressed his fingers on the form and list that Xiao Mahai put on the table. "What's this?" "Some aid materials." Xiao Mahai was busy making tea for Li Tianlan, handing him a cigarette and attentively lighting it for him. Compared with the servile attitude when they first met, Director Xiao now got along with Li Tianlan much more naturally and sincerely. Li Tianlan nodded, as if he didn't care about it at all. Aid materials. There was a series of densely packed materials on the list. Food, clothes, tents, various instruments, mechanical equipment, and so on. There were a lot of materials, and the quantity of each kind was also very high. In addition, there was a batch of monetary aid. The long list of numbers looked beautiful under the light. 600 million. Li Tianlan blinked. Some of the things that were just drawn up today may be added. I need to discuss it with the Chief Administrative Officer tomorrow. Xiao Mahai whispered. To whom? Li Tianlan asked, and then gave his own answer. South America. Your Majesty is wise. Xiao Mahai nodded with a smile. The natural disaster in South America was very sudden. It is said that there was a large-scale aftershock not long ago, and the matter is very serious. According to experts, this super earthquake in South America can even affect the global continental plate in the next few decades. South America is now full of suffering. As a superpower in the dark world, it is our responsibility to help South America. At present, this is only the first batch of aid materials. According to the situation, we may need to invest more manpower, financial resources, and material resources to help South America rebuild after the disaster. What a pair of good eggs. Li Tianlan laughed. Xiao Mahai said that the superpowers in the dark world were like charities, but in fact, if there was no purpose, the so-called disaster relief and aid had nothing to do with the dark world. A force like Emperor Dong's palace, which had close ties with a superpower, might help, but it was only in response to a call. Now, Zhongzhou State had not communicated with Emperor Dong's palace about this matter, but Emperor Dong's palace had come up with a plan to help, which was very telling. Of course the aid was real. The amount of aid they received would only increase. But the main reason wasn't any assistance at all. You want to take advantage of this? Will they march into South America? Li Tianlan asked. Xiao Mahai nodded. I had a brief communication with the military counselor and reached a consensus on this point. Your Majesty, South America is very weak now, and this weakness is multifaceted. Their sense of existence has never been too strong internationally, but in the dark world, South America has always been an area that everyone attaches great importance to. The situation there is complicated, and it is relatively chaotic in all aspects. It has always been the ideal base camp for many superpowers, not only because it is relatively easy to take root there, but also because they can take advantage of the chaotic and delicate situation there to get greater benefits. The Heroes Club and the Jiang family of South America have always been the giants in the dark world of South America. After the chaos in Snow Country, the leader of the fantasy world died, and the leaderless fantasy world began to try to develop in South America. In addition, there are a large number of small forces that are not popular in the whole dark world but are very influential in the local area. They take root there. For them, every chaos there is equivalent to a feast. Arms, drugs, smuggling, gold, jewelry, antiques. As long as you have strength, there are benefits everywhere. Your Majesty, we can take advantage of this opportunity to enter America in the name of aid and expand with Godibia as the center. This super earthquake is an unimaginable disaster for Godibia, but it's an unimaginable opportunity for us. And it's not just a super earthquake. I've confirmed the information from all sides. After the final battle in Beihai, although the dark world still has extremely powerful forces, such forces are too scattered, and there is no clear point of concentration. There are not many second-class forces that can be called, and a considerable number of them were buried in the final battle in Beihai. Now, not only America, but the whole dark world is in an unprecedented state of emptiness. Xiao Mahai's eyes were a little fiery. Your Majesty, you know what this means. America is just a starting point. We are qualified to fight for more things. Of course, Li Tianlan could understand what this meant. In the next few years, the entire Emperor Dong's palace would enter a stage of unimaginable crazy expansion. It was not an exaggeration to describe it as unimaginable and crazy. The development path of Emperor Dong's palace was the same as Li Tianlan's growth speed. They were both explosive. Li Tianlan's foundation was now in Zhongzhou state, and he had absorbed the Samsara Palace. Why hadn't the Samsara Palace been regarded as a superpower in the dark world before? Even if they had experts at the peak of the invincible realm, murderous weapons, and the famous 12 super masters, they were still first-class forces. The most important reason was that Samsara Palace did not have a stable foundation. Their strength was undeniable, but without a foundation to develop freely, it inevitably gave people a feeling of instability. What was missing after Emperor Dong's palace merged with Samsara Palace? Without the master of Samsara Palace at the peak of the invincible realm, but there was Li Tianlan. Without Fire Flaming, the invincible realm expert. But there were 3 more deputy palace masters of the invincible realm. A few heavenly masters at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm were missing. But there were also young experts such as Li Beidian, Bai Yuming, Su Chu, and Du Han Yin, as well as several top assassins of Sai City, such as Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud. What else was missing? Perhaps there was still something missing. But now in Emperor Dong's palace, they now had a new foundation that they could develop freely and could be supported by a new group and a large amount of wealth. What kind of Emperor Dong's palace was this? The invincible Dong Huang. Li Shi, the deputy palace master at the peak of the invincible realm. The deputy palace master who was close to the peak of the invincible realm, the hidden god of Zhongzhou state, Situ Tsanyue. The deputy palace master of the invincible realm was Saint. In the field of wealth, he could be said to be the chief administrative military advisor. Bai Yuming of the half-step invincible realm. His combat capability was no less than that of Lin Yuxian and Li Beidian, who were at the top of the half-step invincible realm. He was the top assassin in the dark world, Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud. There were too many people who could be named. The core power of Emperor Dong's palace was powerful enough to make most people despair in the dark world. The rise of the new group was unstoppable. Outside Zhongzhou state, the current patriarch of the Lin clan was Li Tianlan's woman. The Dark Knights were also allies of Emperor Dong's palace. The Flourishing Age Fund also provided Emperor Dong's palace with massive wealth and connections. In this state, Emperor Dong's palace did not have to think about anything else. He had power, money, and talent. The only thing that Emperor Dong's palace needed to do now was to expand. It could even be said to be brainless expansion. Because he didn't need to worry about anything. The only task of Emperor Dong's palace was to spread the influence of Emperor Dong's palace to the entire dark world in the name of Li Tianlan. But now, they were facing a broken world of darkness. America, Europe, Snow Country, East Island, Tiannan. There were opportunities everywhere. Both had excellent opportunities. Then do it. There was nothing to worry about. Your Majesty, about a few hours ago, I received a call from Lin Buzheng. Xiao Mahai thought for a moment and continued to speak. Lin Buzheng? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. He was not familiar with the name, but he was definitely not a stranger. Qin Weibai had mentioned the name to him. And those who knew the Lin clan also knew the name. This was the patriarch of the largest branch of the Lin clan in South America. He could be regarded as a top figure in all of America. The name Lin Buzheng could almost be regarded as a world-class wealthy family. It had been rooted in America for nearly 200 years. It had spread its branches and was very involved in a wide range of fields. Jewelry, minerals, energy, tobacco, football, arms, gold, rubber, aerospace, banking. It was in all fields in South America. Lin Buzheng's shadow. Even in the entire Lin clan, he was a super heavyweight branch patriarch. He is one of the core figures of the Lin clan and a friend of Mr. Lin Fengting. Xiao Mahai chuckled and said, in fact, on the day of the decisive battle in Beihai, Lin Buzheng contacted the elites of the Men in Black, Fantasy World, the Heroes Club, and several other forces. They rushed into the headquarters of the Jiang family of South America and destroyed 6 secret bases of the Jiang family of South America in one day. At the same time, more than 80% of the core members of the Jiang family of South America were wiped out. Now in South America, there are not only natural disasters but also man-made disasters. It's very lively. Lin Buzheng hopes to cooperate with Emperor Dong's palace. He sincerely invites us to march into South America and hopes that Your Majesty can visit South America when you have time. Now they have parted ways with the Heroes Club and several other forces. But according to the prior agreement, Lin Buzheng will not infringe on the interests of the Heroes Club, the Men in Black, and other forces. Xiao Mahai's voice was somewhat meaningful. Li Tianlan's heart skipped a beat and he whispered, he hopes that we can help him deal with the Heroes Club and the Men in Black? We have no reason to refuse. Xiao Mahai said with a smile. Old fox. Li Tianlan laughed and scolded, he said it was cooperation, but in fact, he wants us to clean up the mess for him? If it can be cleaned up, it won't be a mess. Xiao Mahai smiled and lowered his head to look at the list on the table. Li Tianlan was also looking down at the list. His eyes fell on a name at the top of the list and he narrowed his eyes. There were about a dozen names on the list, but they had been deleted, changed, and constantly smeared, almost covering the whole piece of paper. But all the changes were concentrated on the names in the middle area. The names at the top and the names at the bottom had not been changed from beginning to end. The name listed alone at the top was undoubtedly the most suitable candidate in Xiao Mahai's mind to represent Emperor Dong's palace to develop its foundation in South America. This was the first time that Emperor Dong's palace had expanded to a distant place. This person could undoubtedly be regarded as the commander of this expansion. If he could gain a foothold in South America, from the perspective of Emperor Dong's palace, he could be said to be a vassal of Emperor Dong's palace and a high-ranking official of border provinces. Emperor Dong's palace currently ranked 3rd, but he was the most powerful deputy palace master. Li Shi. This was Xiao Mahai's choice. He hoped that Li Shi could lead the team to America and become the stabilizing force of Emperor Dong's palace's expansion in America. She has just come to Emperor Dong's palace. Li Tianlan knocked on the table. I know. Xiao Mahai nodded with a smile. Why her? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly. You know. Xiao Mahai's smile was very subtle. Li Tianlan also smiled and said calmly, What are you worried about? I'm not worried, Your Majesty. Xiao Mahai said softly, I'm just trying to avoid accidents to the greatest extent. In any form, any accidents that may be bad for Emperor Dong's palace are my job. There is no doubt about the strength of Deputy Palace Master Li Shi. The situation in America is complicated. The Heroes Club, Fantasy World, and even the remaining power of the Jiang family of South America. Although these forces have no leader, the foundation of the super forces should not be underestimated. Lin Buzheng's initiative to cooperate with us is also a very good start. Under such circumstances, we should have a meticulous and powerful person over there who can suppress all the forces. Considering all the conditions, Deputy Palace Master Li Shi is the most suitable one. He is in America. For America and here, it is the most responsible way to avoid accidents. Li Tianlan did not speak. Xiao Mahai gritted his teeth and simply continued, not only Deputy Palace Master Li Shi, but also Deputy Palace Master Situ. If necessary, it is also a good choice for Deputy Palace Master Situ to go to Europe. Your Majesty, we have a good relationship with the Dark Knights. Europe is much more lively than America. If we expand to Europe, Deputy Palace Master Situ will certainly contribute a lot. Why not Li Shi go to Europe, but Hidden God go to America? Li Tianlan smiled faintly. Deputy Palace Master Li Shi is a little stronger. Xiao Mahai's voice was soft and slow. Although the situation in Europe is more complicated, we have natural allies there. The Dark Knights will help us a lot. In South America, Mr. Lin Fengting will not always be in South America. Although the strength of the Lin clan in South America is very strong, they now have no invincible realm experts. Good reason. Li Tianlan said flatly. Xiao Mahai fell silent and just stared at the list on the table in front of him. This list could be said to be quite interesting. Xiao Mahai was already considering Situ Tsangyue, but after all, he had not yet carried it out. In the list that he had begun to draw up to America, Li Shi was the leader, and Xiao Mahai assigned her as his deputy, Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud. Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud of Sai City. Li Tianlan shook his head slightly. It's too deliberate. The list needs to continue to be changed. It's all up to Your Majesty. Xiao Mahai's smile was meticulous. In fact, both of them were very clear about the real intention of arranging Li Shi to America and even Situ Tsangyue to Europe. Although Li Tianlan felt that it was not necessary, he would not completely deny his butler's suggestion. He picked up the list and put it aside, saying flatly, Li Guangtu will not stay here for too long. Li Guangtu had become his prisoner. As a prisoner, after he was brought to Xianyuan City from Nanyuan by Li Tianlan, he had fallen into a deep coma because of serious injuries. Li Tianlan kept Li Guangtu here, and he also stayed here. When Xianyuan Wushang rushed back, Li Tianlan was ready to seriously solve the problem between him and the Purgatory of Heaven capital. When Li Guangtu was still in Emperor Dong's palace, he sent Li Shi and Situ Tsangyue to other places. From Xiao Mahai's point of view, it was to prevent accidents. From Li Tianlan's point of view, this matter was actually not a bad thing. Xiao Mahai smiled and whispered, Your Majesty is wise. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.